Good morning, Selene. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Welcome to our final day of our final summit of 2021 and our four-part series. Hard to believe.
We're almost there. You know, I woke up this morning and I was thinking of two different thoughts that were presented as bookends yesterday at the beginning and the end of the summit. The first bookend was expressed by Chris Newman, our farmer evangelist and co-founder of Silvana Q Farms. And he was talking about, as a Native American, how his father told him that the white man brought a lot of lines with them. You know, I think, cultural lines, certainly geographic lines, socioeconomic lines. And then we had Tracy Medina of Presence Marketing at the end of the day in her Regenerative Slam, taking us for a walk in the forest near her home, where she really pointed out nature's intelligent design by sharing not only what is above the ground, but under the ground, with the symbiosis that exists between the fungal kingdoms and the forest biota, and how they all work together in this beautiful system where clearly there aren't any lines. And I thought those two ideas really presented the choice that we have as we approach our work, and even as we approach our own personal lives, these two different ways to view the world. And certainly the regenerative way is expressed through the beauty of the forest, and not through the idea of these artificial lines that we tend to impose in many different ways.
Beautifully said, and so true, so true. And I when I woke up this morning, I was determined that I would find a poem from Mary Oliver that would speak to us. And I do this thing called bibliomancy, where I just kind of open a book and see where I land. And this morning I did that, and I feel like I landed on something that is deeply apropos to what you just shared, Elizabeth, and kind of our overall shared story of our now. So this poem by Mary Oliver is called Meadowlark Sings and I Greet Him in Return. Meadowlark, when you sing, it's as if you lay your yellow breast upon mine and say, hello, hello. And are we not of one family in our delight of life? You sing, I listen. Both are necessary if the world is continue going around, night heavy and light laden, though not everyone knows this, or at least not yet, or perhaps has forgotten it in the torn fields, in the terrible debris of progress.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you, Mary Oliver. For those of you who aren't familiar with Mary Oliver, her poetry is very much about her love affair with our living world, and very reflective, I think, of the deep underpinnings of our motivation as an organization to do what we do. And that will be my segue to give gratitude to our sponsors who help us stay busy and fruitful with our activity. So I would like to acknowledge our galvanized sponsors. Megafood is a vitamin and supplement company working toward a world where everyone is truly nourished by creating premium products. Applegate, changing the meat we eat. The way food is raised can change and transform lives, from the farmer who grows it to the person who eats it to the animal that lives it. Into a powerful storytelling app, everything, everyone. We are all connected through story. Give your products a voice, share their story. Our influence sponsors are Lumberg Family Farms. It's been growing organic rice for generations, bringing eco-friendly long grain rice and short grain rice to our table. For those of you who saw Pablo's presentation, we saw those beautiful migratory birds who are definitely part of the Lumberg Family Farm story. HB Specialty Foods focus is on delivering the most superior solutions for the future of food. They have been at the forefront of this movement for years. Vital Farms, get the best eggs produced by farmers who raise happy hens. Simple Mills, clean, nutritious food for a better life. It's that simple. Teton Waters Ranch is passionate about conservation, sustainable ranching, and the way of life of enlightened ranchers raising grass-fed beef around the world. Quinn Snacks, classic snacks reimagined, simple ingredients, farm to bag transparency, real food just tastes better. Spark sponsors are Dr. Bronner's, In Rhythm, SIBO, Gaia Herbs, Haberman, Presence Marketing, Zago Foods, and Nyman Ranch. Thank you very much for your generosity to Regenerative Rising.
Great, Selene. Thank you so much for sharing those sponsors with us, and really appreciate everything they do to support this, these wonderful convenings.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And again, welcome to the Regenerative Earth Summit number 4, where we're really diving into the power of the narrative and how we tell our story. It's my privilege to introduce our keynote this morning. His name is Brian Walkler. He is speaking on the art of story, and he is a veteran of storytelling from Haberman, a mission-based marketing and communications agency telling the stories of pioneers making a difference in the world of food, agriculture, health, and wellness. Brian is a partner and the president of Haberman, and he is recognized by his colleagues as an expert at marrying mission, message, and media. And he has shaped some of the most memorable campaigns to come out of the agency in the last 2 decades. And of import, in a former life, he led the 90s alt-rock band Becoming Laszlo. And supposedly there's still an album out there somewhere. So I love that. To remind everyone, we have Q&A following Brian's keynote. So please do put your questions in the chat as they arise. And I think we are ready to bring Brian onto the stage and move into what I am definitely anticipating to be a very dynamic presentation. Brian, welcome.
Don't look up the CD, please. Thank you so much, Selene, for the kind introduction. The conference has been just fantastic so far, so I'm humbled to be here. Before I get started here, and we're going to load the presentation here for just a second, but before I do get started, I just wanted to acknowledge the news from my community, Minneapolis, yesterday, and share that how thankful we are for the justice and accountability for the murder of George Floyd. That said, I think we all know we have a long way to go to eliminate systemic racism and police brutality in our communities, and hopefully this was a small, meaningful step in the right direction. So thank you. I just wanted to acknowledge that relevant piece that's happening right now. All right, well, let's get this thing. You able to share your screen there?
Yeah.
All right. Well, while my wonderful esteemed colleague John is pulling up the presentation, I just want to say I'm truly humbled to be a part of this. The panels and speakers yesterday, I got to sit in on a few of them, were incredible, and really, really happy to be here. I wish I was hanging out with all of you beautiful, smart, wonderful people in person, but hopefully very soon. I think we're on the right path here. In the meantime, it's not often you get to present from the comfort of your office chair. So today, I'm really excited to talk about storytelling, especially as it relates to inspiring movements around important issues, creating internal alignment, building brands, and generating awareness, all with the goal of ultimately changing behavior and inspiring action, which I think is what we're all trying to accomplish. I'm hoping that by the end of our time together today, you have just a few more tools at your disposal, or at least a few more insights to apply to how to better tell your story. I'm really going to focus on the how today, how to get there, how you can get there with your story. Let's see here. I'm also excited. I caught a couple of themes yesterday that I think this will hopefully naturally build upon, like authenticity and storytelling. So I'm going to be talking a lot about that today as well. I am going to ask for a few interactions throughout our time together here, where I'll ask you to post something in the chat. So thank you in advance for your participation. So For the past 23 years, I've helped lead Haberman. We're a mission-based communications agency. I first met these two, Fred and Sarah Haberman, wonderful friends of mine, founders of our agency, way back in 1998, and I was immediately drawn to their story. Fred and Sarah had traveled around the world. They created a business in Kazakhstan. They ran an adventure travel company where they take executives out into the wilderness and do executive coaching. And through those experiences, they recognized the power of story and its role in different cultures and communities. So by the time I walked in the door as a wide-eyed 24-year-old, their vision for creating an agency focused on the power of story had already been formed. That aspiration to leverage communications and marketing to lay the groundwork for positive societal change was already in motion. I remember distinctly having the reaction of, wait, what, you can actually be in marketing and do good in the world? I'm in, I'm totally in. So fueled by a healthy amount of naive confidence, and we had a pizza shop down below us, so lots of pizza, our team set out to pursue this bold mission, to tell the stories of pioneers making a difference in the world. Now, it definitely hasn't been all sunshine and rainbows along our journey, but we've been incredibly fortunate that this mission has led us to work with pioneers across many different industries. And we've helped tell some pretty big stories over the past 20 plus years. Many of these stories have been about something I think we're all passionate about here: environmental education, stewardship, and responsibility. So a couple of quick examples. For example, we helped tell the story of Anne Bancroft and Lieve Arneson, the first two women to cross Antarctica on skis. Anne and Lieve are actually former school teachers, and so our campaign was focused on engaging students in classrooms around the world to follow the expedition and a curriculum on environmental issues, including the impact of climate change. We've been incredibly fortunate to work with many of the consumer brands leading the organic movement over the past 2 decades. Some wonderful partnerships. Our goal has been to get consumers to change behavior and purchase more organic products, and as a result, drive growth of organic farming. We've also tried to be, wrong way there. There we go. We've also tried to be pioneers ourselves. We created Urban Organics. It's an aquaponics business that included 2 aquaponics facilities in St. Paul, Minnesota. Urban Organics helped introduce a new way to potentially approach food production in urban and water-constrained areas. We were actually able to spur some economic development through facilities located in economically challenged areas. And then most recently, we've helped numerous organizations in the regenerative agriculture movement find their voices. For example, for SIBO Technologies, it's been about helping companies better support and understand the practices and the regenerative potential of the farmers in their supply chain. All right, so let's get to it. What are the ingredients for great storytelling? We've obviously thought a lot about this over the years, and we've coached countless organizations, and we believe it really comes down to 2 simple things: authenticity and relevancy. Okay, I'm really excited to dive into both of these. I'm going to spend a lot of time with definitions and approaches and how-tos, but before we get into these things, I wanted to share a very brief personal story to help illustrate this concept a little bit and why I've been interested in storytelling from a very young age. All right, I had 2 main passions growing up: hockey and music. A little bit disconnected, but loved both of them. I'm super proud to say that I was the only hockey player at my high school who also sang in the show choir. That basically means I knew how to take a slap shot and to do a pretty mean jazz square at one point in my life. I also, as mentioned earlier, had an opportunity later to play in a band and write music with my wife, Tracy. And yes, I had a pretty sweet ponytail at that point. Hockey taught me the importance of competition, teamwork, grit, perseverance. And music taught me a lot of different things, like how to be truly in harmony with others, when to listen, which came up yesterday as a big part of storytelling: when to listen, when to take the lead, and when to step back for someone else's solo, right? But what really drew me the most with music was the storytelling within songs and the songwriting. I was always intrigued by the personal connection I had to someone else's thoughts or ideals or message. I vividly remember sitting in my older brother's room, listening to songs we loved, like Blackbird by the Beatles, and him asking me pointedly, you know what this is about, right? And being blown away at the age of 6 or 7 to learn Paul McCartney was really singing about the racial strife in the American South in the 1960s. It was truly an awakening for me as I connected those dots. I felt like I'd discovered something new. Now, some songs are very straightforward and more maybe observational in nature, like Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald by Gordon Lightfoot. The legend lives on from the Chippewa down of the big lake they call Gitchagumi. The lake, it is said, never gives up or dead when the skies of November turn gloomy. All right, I'm in. I want to hear this story, right? Tell me more about this lake and her dead. So do you guys have any narrative songs, any that resonate with you, any songs that tell stories that are your go-tos? If you do, please post them in the chat. I'd love to see some of your favorite narrative songs. Other songs are stories that are meant to inspire and advocate for something, like Lizzo's Good as Hell. It's an anthem that reminds us that we're not alone, we're not invisible, no matter how we look or feel. It's a story we can see ourselves within. I so want to sing this, but there's no way I'm going to do it. But I do my hair toss, check my nails, baby, how you feeling? Feeling good as hell, right? How can that not get you excited and want to be a part of it? Again, do you have any favorite inspiration or anthem songs that just pick you up when you need it? Please post those in the chat as well. I'd like to, Horse with No Name, The Boxer, absolutely. Some of the anthem songs, anything by Alison Krauss, love it. Yep, right there with you. And then some stories are incredibly obscure and personal, but still resonate for some reason, like R.E.M's Losing My Religion. The fact that a 4.5-minute song featuring a mandolin, and I don't think any of us really knew what it was about, hit #1 is just crazy, but something deeply personal to Michael Stipe was expressed in a story that was deeply relevant to a lot of people. Some stories are just plain sexy, right? I mean, I'm from Minneapolis. I have to share Prince. And by the way, it's the 5th anniversary of his passing. So, all right. Okay, so get to the point, Brian. What has always blown me away about great songwriters is their ability to take something deeply personal and authentic to them and make it relevant to many others, to make others feel like they're a part of the story being told. That's the magic. This is no different than what a lot of us are trying to accomplish with the regenerative movement. Take something we're passionate about, find our collective voice, and make it connect deeply with others. That is the art of the story. Okay, so now let's get into the meat of it. Just gonna take a sip of water. All right, the powerful intersection of authenticity and relevancy in storytelling. Sorry about that. All right, we're definitely gonna get to data analytics and how to use TikTok in just a few minutes here, but let's start with authenticity. Let's start with your why. So authenticity is really your why. It's your mission, it's your purpose, your contribution in the world. Now, there's no surprise, the why behind what we all do is important, right? But how do you uncover it? How do you articulate it? How do you rally an organization around it? How do you ensure your internal story matches your external story and your team has ownership in the process to get there? What are those fundamental elements? All right, well, let me share a brief example with you. DEA. So we've been working with DEA since 2015 or so as their digital marketing partner. You're probably familiar with them already, but DEA is a wonderful plant-based innovator that provides a wide range of dairy-free foods. In July 2017, DEA was acquired after multiple years of growth and success. And in 2019, they appointed a new CEO, Michael Watt. When I first met Michael at Expo in 2019, he and DEA's VP of Marketing, Dan Ho, were trying to articulate a new North Star for the company. They knew how important it was in this moment of ownership transition and new leadership to connect DEA's rich history and origin story with its future. Michael and Dan had been crafting a purpose statement, but the more a small group of us talked about the importance of getting this foundational part of the DEA story right, the more it became clear that to the two of them, that the two of them writing a purpose statement with input from a few of us marketing folks in isolation was probably not the right approach. They also realized it was appropriate to have some outside facilitation of the process to hopefully gain some new perspective and ensure some objectivity and internal buy-in. So here's what we did and where we landed. In addition to spending meaningful time with Michael and the executive team, we started by sitting down and listening to a lot of Dan's, people who'd been there for years, brand new people across almost every department. So we conducted a lot of interviews. In addition to covering a lot of other ground, we asked them to share why they come to work every day, why they believe in DEA, and collected those inputs. We then synthesized everything into 3 main takeaways. And here's what those takeaways were. So number 1, innovation is in our DNA. We're hungry to reclaim leadership and excellence. The company was founded on innovation as one of the first dairy-free cheese options available. Let's get back to our DNA. Number 2, there's pent-up demand and a sense of urgency. We're ready to be bold. It's pretty exciting to hear that from your organization, right? So post-acquisition, as expected, there was maybe some uncertainty, maybe a little bit of a lull, and as a result, people were ready for the next chapter. They wanted to take action. There was a definite sense of urgency. And then third, to break through and accelerate growth, we need to focus on creating new opportunities. All right, so we took these takeaways, distilled them into one purpose statement for DEA. And here's where we landed. At DEA, we're on a mission to pioneer plant-based breakthroughs and that delight people and planet. Pretty cool. Today, this purpose statement is central to all employee onboarding. It provides a strategic lens to evaluate new business opportunities for the company and is really one of the foundational elements in the company's consumer marketing and storytelling. It really kind of grounds everything. So what are some key takeaways as far as an approach to articulating your why? 1, be inclusive and create ownership, internal ownership. If you have a team, you want them to have buy-in in this process. 2, connect to your DNA. If you've been around a while, it might make sense to go back and look at why and where things started for the organization. If you're brand new to it and an entrepreneur starting something new, it may be very apparent right away. Be bold and aspirational. It doesn't have to all be true right away. It can be an aspirational statement that you're working towards. And then keep it short and memorable. You want people to be able to repeat it. You notice how I led at the beginning of this with our mission at Haberman, which has been our mission for the past 27 years. A lot of great organizations have purpose statements articulating their role within the regenerative movement. For example, our wonderful host, Regenerative Rising's role is to elevate and forward regenerative principles that expand the capability of people to lead from a living systems worldview. So now I'm going to ask you to please write down and share via chat some thoughts or phrases or messages that articulate why you're here today. What's your role within the regenerative movement? What is your personal or organizational purpose as it relates to the regenerative movement? Okay. If you're a grower, for example, you probably have a different role than a convener like Regenerative Rising. Or if you help enable the supply chain, you have a different role than someone selling a consumer product. So let's just get this rolling and see if we can get some inspire and empower, working to regenerate financial systems. That's great. Connecting people with shared passions to advance a movement. Absolutely. Fantastic. And hopefully we can collect, I know we're recording this, so we can collect some of these chats and it'd be great. I'm happy to take a look at all of them afterwards and combine them into some higher level points that have been generated by this group today. Helping with adoption and corporate culture, absolutely. Fantastic, look at them roll in, love it. Thank you, really appreciate the participation here. This is great. So I should probably keep going though. I'll wrap up authenticity with a reminder to never forget, your voice is powerful and unique. Passion goes a long way. Don't be afraid to share, okay? All right, let's get to relevance here. All right, bit of a spoiler alert. It's really, really difficult to break through. There's some research out there that says that we all are exposed to 4,000 plus ads each day, 4,000. So there's a lot coming at us. So how, with that landscape, do you set yourself up for success? I'm going to break this into 5 principles for today, and I'll go through each one of them. 1, understand your audience. 2, uncover an insight and some tension. Good stories have tension, right? Create a story that uniquely solves the tension. Understand how and where to show up. Some of that was talked about yesterday too on one of the panels. And remain relevant over time. There are multiple chapters to your story, so remaining relevant over time is important. All right, let's start with audience here. Understand the true nature of your audience. First, you obviously have to ask the question, who are they and how many of them are there? If you're a CPG business, for example, that's going to reveal your market opportunity, right? But beyond that, you need to look at, what do they care about? How do you fit into their lives? What's driving their behavior? What other brands or solutions are they already interacting with? Gathering audience data and insights, understanding that landscape can take shape in many ways, from smaller scale primary research conducted directly with consumers like focus groups, to larger scale segmentation studies where you divide a broad audience into smaller groups based on similarities. Then you can prioritize which segments will be most important, or for a CPG company, most lucrative first. And you can leverage secondary data sources like MRI Simmons and spins, which give you understanding of things like beliefs or brand affinity and current purchase patterns. Here's an example of some primary research we conducted with Lundberg Family Farms, where we had a number of current and prospective Lundberg consumers share buying habits and what's in their shopping carts and pantries through a journaling exercise we had them complete over the course of a week. And this work really provided a lot of insight into what makes them tick, their perceptions of Lundberg. And it led to, this initial audience research led to and contributed to a recently evolved positioning and look and feel from Lundberg that helped contemporize the brand and make their rich story of environmental leadership and stewardship even more inviting and approachable to consumers. This is actually a representation of some of their most recent storytelling work we've completed, and their website as well. The key to leverage all this data is to weave together a persona, a clear picture of your audience. That will help inform how to make your story relevant. It's also really important to not make assumptions and realize when you need outside guidance to help deepen your understanding of an audience and potentially even help co-create your story. We actually helped launch the new tobacco cessation program for Minnesota in 2020 called Quit Partners. The program offers free help for all Minnesotans to quit smoking, but certain communities within the state are disproportionately affected by commercial tobacco's harms. One example of this is the American Indian community. The tension within this story was a bit nuanced because for generations, American Indians have used sacred tobacco to honor the creator through spiritual and ceremonial practices. So it was key to draw a distinction between sacred tobacco and commercial tobacco, like cigarettes and vapes, which cause alarming rates of disease and death within the American Indian community. So with the guidance from the American Indian community, the American Indian Quit Line program was developed. It connects callers to quit coaches who understand the culture. To develop the identity for the program and the storytelling campaign, we collaborated with members of the American Indian community, including an American Indian designer and photographer. And with them, we co-created a look and feel that leaned into culturally relevant colors, symbols, and other important details. Okay, now that we have tools to better understand our audience, let's take it to the next level and focus on uncovering a juicy insight and some tension for the starting point of the story. All right, this is an often overlooked step. It's not enough to just know data points about your audience. You need to go deeper. It's about understanding the audience's truth and finding an actionable insight. So what's an insight? Good question. Insights are different from observations. We define insight as identifying attention and how you, brand, individual, organization, can uniquely resolve that tension. Insights are honest, they're inspirational, they're aspirational, unique, actionable. Let's look at a quick example here. Meal Connect is an online platform created by Feeding America to empower and encourage more food manufacturers and retailers, such as grocery stores, to donate their excess food versus going to waste. Through interviews with multiple prospective users of the platform and other audience research, we learned that although doing the right thing in their local community was incredibly important to these prospective users, our biggest barrier to adoption is going to be the unfortunate truth that the most simple thing to do for an already overworked employee or store worker is to throw the excess food in the garbage. So we are currently building the Meal Connect story off an insight based on this barrier or tension. All right, we're gonna play just a little game here. Right here, I have 4 phrases listed. There are 3 observations, and one of them is the insight that we're working against. And I'm gonna ask if you can spot the insight. I'll read them really quickly, and please put your guess in the chat if you would. Meal Connect provides advantages such as cost reductions and tax benefits. Food donors want to serve their community because they feel a part of the community. Time is the greatest enemy facing food rescue programs. The most essential act of community aid must also be the most simple. All right, I have one guess so far. Ooh, all right, I'm seeing a pattern here. Good guesses. I'll give you just another second here. I think the majority is right. It is number 4. It is number 4. Number 1, it's honest, but it's pretty straightforward. Not a lot of inspiration or aspiration there, if you look at it. 2 is honest as well, but doesn't really have enough tension. There's not a real tension point in it. 3 is inspirational, but maybe not as unique as 4, and maybe a little bit one-dimensional. So we felt like number 4 really hit that sweet spot on almost all the criteria. So insights should feel like a bit of an aha, and they should give any storyteller or creative team in the marketing world a launching point. So hopefully that was helpful. All right, so now we have purpose articulated, some understanding of our audience, and a strong insight to build upon. Now you're ready to create your story. So let's create a story that uniquely solves the tension. All right, now it's time to break into your creative toolkit, find a compelling way to craft that story through messaging, art direction, design. We talked about video yesterday, copy. Now, your story can break through with an epic event or moment. I mentioned the Bancroft Arneson expedition earlier, where we attached a campaign to an epic event. You can break through with thought leadership and advocacy like Organic Valley has done for decades. And you can break through with humor and entertainment. We've all seen examples of that. Regardless, though, you need to make sure that your story builds from your authenticity or purpose. And ideally, you need to solve the tension. So here's a quick example of how we help traditional medicinals and herbalist created tea brands solve an audience tension through storytelling. The audience truth here was, hey, I have a wellness routine and I'm intrigued by TM, but a little skeptical of how plants can support my routine. It really came down to a twofold tension. I have maybe some skepticism of the tea's efficacy. How do I know this is really going to work? And maybe some confusion of product use. There are so many brands and types of teas to choose from. When do I drink what tea? So that was the tension we were working with. Our storytelling strategy was to highlight how each herbalist created traditional medicinals tea offers just the right dose of plant power for a specific wellness need. The storytelling platform we built from was a dose of plant power. So within the campaign, we paired specific teas to specific moments in our audience's life, like resolving stress with soothing chamomile lavender tea or encouraging sleep with nighty-night tea. This gave consumers a specific entry point into the brand while also suggesting other teas that might fit into their day. We represented the expertise of the herbalist through an illustrative layer that actually diagrammed the specific benefits of a certain part of the plant used in that tea. And we further expanded on that expertise in copy and voiceover on the many centuries of wisdom on which the tea blend was created. So really great work Traditional Medicinals has done over multiple decades. They've just been incredible. They have an incredible authentic story, so. Whew. All right, as of figuring out your purpose, audience, and story weren't enough, we now need to look at the channels where you're gonna tell the story within, right? And we know they come with different guidelines, character counts, and meaning, and require nuancing your message for each accordingly. By the way, there was a great panel discussion yesterday with Max and the others on the benefits of different channels and how to leverage them, some great tips on video, influencers, print. So I'm excited to be building upon that. Now, remember, back with the audience understanding, we're going to know who they are and where they get their information through that upfront work. You know, and it could be, you know, from an entertaining environment like Armchair Expert podcast, which is a personal favorite of mine, to a hardworking trade pub like Supply Chain Management Review, to Edible Marin mentioned yesterday, right? But we need to customize your story by channel. And just a few quick rules of thumb I suggest are, first, think about what your audience needs to know at the moment and what you want them to do next, right? Maybe it's offering deeper product information to someone heavily researching options, or maybe it's a strong call to action that drives a final decision at shelf. The message should be customized to the reaction you want from your audience. Two, be aware of context. For instance, someone expects a LinkedIn post to feel very different from an Instagram story. Beyond that, though, today's climate requires attention to the news and cultural trends like never before, particularly on social media. Think about what message might precede or follow yours that could paint your post in a negative light. If you're, for example, doing a big product promotion when there's a lot of social justice-oriented messaging happening in that environment. And then third, just stay true to your brand. Totally, that might mean some channels aren't right for you. For example, TikTok. I promised I'd mention TikTok. TikTok is probably not right if you have a sensitive or serious message and don't have the budget for video content. That's okay. Focus on what best fits you and your audience. And as I mentioned earlier, data sources like MRI, Simmons can provide deeper insights on how different audience segments consume different media. And then finally, keep your story relevant over time. In your own life, there's a difference between what you say to someone you just met and someone you've known for a while. Brands can act the same way. You need to pay attention to how your story evolves over time. What are the chapters of the story? You can see here how, I believe this is an early ad from Impossible, shows up differently in an early ad than how they show up now, where that awareness is there. A lot more necessary explanation on the front end of who are they? Who are they for? What are their benefits? And then you see it today. And now that we're aware of them, you can show up in more of a hero branded like way. So keeping your audience informed, entertained, or educated with relevant content builds deeper interest and trust over time. All right, have we had enough of me? Should we?
Not really, you're awesome.
Should we go back to Lizzo for a second here? All right, well, just quick summary, and then we can talk a little bit more. But number one, be a truth teller. It all starts with authenticity. It starts with your why. Tell a story that matters. Make it personal. Your voice is unique and special. Make that human connection. We talked about that yesterday, or the panels and speakers talked about the importance of people and human connection. Make sure your story passes the so what test. Know what makes that audience tick. Understand their existing emotions around the category, and be bold. Spark some tension. Find that energy. Remain relevant over time. So this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me to speak. I'm happy to do my best with a few questions. Before I do, I am going to have just a quick walk-off music, though.
Do my head toss, check my names. Baby, how you feeling? Head toss, check my names. Baby, how you feeling?
How'd you do it?
That was excellent.
All right.
That was an excellent, excellent presentation, Brian. Thank you so much. I loved it. It exceeded. I mean, when we first met and talked about this, I knew it was going to be great. Just meeting you and feeling your energy, and then seeing how you integrated some engagement. And that's just so beautiful and much appreciated for your effort in bringing something so meaningful to us today.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm humbled to be a part of this. So really appreciate you trusting in me to deliver.
Right on. Well, I have a question that I find quite provocative, and I'm going to be curious how you respond to it. So here's the big question. Yeah. How do we create a collective story for the regenerative movement as a whole?
Mm-hmm. You know, I was thinking a little bit about that. First and foremost, I think there needs to be some path to alignment. You know, and that's why I started with this idea of we all have different roles in it, and we all might have different opinions of what it should or shouldn't be.
Right.
At the end of the day, though, there's a North Star that we're all working towards that we can all agree upon. And instead of arguing about the different paths to that North Star, instead of getting caught up in the nuance, which I think some of us often do, especially on the liberal side of things. Let's remind ourselves that we're all working towards the greater good, and there are things that we can agree on, and be okay with some compromise in how to get there. We're not all going to think the same way about how to get there or what should be included, but the more we spend our time maybe disagreeing on those other things, we're just wasting our time and not getting to the goal. So I think that alignment path is really, really important, and understanding we all have different roles. We all have different experiences. We all have different opinions, but that's okay. That's good. That's what's going to get us to where we need to go.
But it sounds like there is probably a shared North Star.
Yes. Yes.
And that would be a useful effort for us to really cultivate that articulation.
Yeah, you know, the exercise earlier in the presentation of just getting people to share their role or purpose within the movement, I kind of started with that. Maybe we could craft something actually in the moment with all of these people, but I didn't want to step ahead of, I know there are a lot of great organizations doing great work in this area. And I guess I don't know if there is a cohesive, aligned North Star for the movement as a whole.
I don't think there is, but I think there could be something organized. So we'll play with what we saw in the chat, and I think we'll take you up on your offer to take a look at that.
I'd love to do it. Yeah, I'd love to look at that, and if there is a next step to it, to even collect some more information and get people rallied around one North Star. And then, you know, we talk a lot about that just from an organizational development standpoint, even our agency. You want that North Star, you want that mission, but then you want people to quickly figure out what their role is in helping accomplish that mission and focus their attention there.
Exactly. Well, that image of the nutritional medicinals and those beautiful like images sort of being drawn made me think about that. Like you have your central hub, that's that North Star. And then there's all these beautiful spiraling figurines going off of it that represent all of us in terms of how we feed into that larger vision.
I agree. I would say more celebration of one another's efforts, you know, and acknowledgement of one another's efforts, even if they're not completely in line or with our own.
Well, I think to achieve that would be a big shift in some old human patterns that have to also transcend. If we want to, you know, to birth a new era, there's also fundamentals that have to shift in each of us in terms of our normative or habits around thought and behavior.
Yeah, and it's a good proxy to look at too, is just what the organic movement has gone through, and the different standards and the different organizations and the, you know, so And I think there were some challenges early on within that movement of just getting agreement and alignment. So, and at the end of the day, again, we all want more organic farming, right? So
Right.
let's get out of our own way a little bit and
Yes.
and create that alignment.
Yeah, there's a rather famous saying in the natural products industry is the internal firing squad. So it is an opportunity to transcend. One other question I want to ask you is, what are leading attributes that motivate consumer behavior? Is it product quality, climate change? Do people, these bigger?
Yeah, it's price. No, I mean,
Yeah,
price.
I think so. Unfortunately, often.
It's all over the map, and that's where you get into that audience segmentation and really understanding. Some people are willing to pay more for products that they know are doing good in the world. I will say there's some fatigue on the sustainability story. Unfortunately, a lot of them don't want to they want to know that it's good and then just be able to move on with their lives. I think it was mentioned yesterday by Chris, they're very busy. There's a lot of other things going on. They want that credibility, but they don't necessarily want to spend a lot of time digging into the details around it. But yes, they're looking for credibility or quality. They are looking for authenticity. I mean, there's a reason that Whole Foods continues to put new and up and coming brands on shelf because that's what consumers want. They want that discovery. Now, COVID did change that a little bit. People went to the staples, went to what they know. Prior to that, though, there was a huge wave of just, especially with the younger generation, wanting that discovery moment of, hey, I found something new. Look at this. Isn't this an interesting story behind it? So.
A very interesting point. I've talked with other colleagues about what the COVID effect and, what will emerge on the other side when this is kind of in the rear view mirror, and will some of those patterns reassert themselves? Because, I think mac and cheese went out the roof. And those companies were like, oh, we've been vilified, or not vilified. We've been validated in our meaningless food that we're putting on the shelf.
Yeah, I think you'll see some habits stick. I think people will eat at home more. But there is a sense we talk about, like after the 1918 pandemic came the roaring 20s. So are we on the cusp of that, of people just wanting to get out and socialize and experience and, all those things. But I do think eating wise and purchasing, you will see it go back into that in that direction.
That's a very interesting point about the roaring 20s. I love that.
Yes, that would be fun, wouldn't it?
That sounds great. Again, Brian, thank you so much to you and your team for just helping you bring such a powerful presentation to us. And I'm looking forward to more opportunities to have you be a part of our programming.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Love what all of you out there are doing around this movement. And if there's anything I can do to help, or if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to connect if something didn't get answered that you have interest in.
Cool. If you're willing to share how people can reach you in the chat,
yep.
Please do. And we will also, as I said, we'll play with some of these things that came in during your presentation and see what arises. So we are going to pass the torch to Elizabeth to introduce our next speaker.
Let me just say really quickly, Brian, be careful what you offer. The need for an industry-wide lexicon that we all can agree on to talk about regenerative is so important. And the development of a toolkit behind that is something that's been in conversation for quite a while. So we may be planning the next regenerative summit around the development of that, and you can lead us through that process. So stay tuned. Okay.
All right.
Speaking of toolkits, I first heard of the Food for Climate League when the Climate Collaborative invited Yves Thoreau-Paul to host an interactive training that provided a simple methodology for developing climate communications plans and messaging. I learned that the FCL is a nonprofit research and communications collaborative that's focused on creating narratives that can celebrate foods that are good for us and good for the planet. And they want to share those narratives with businesses, governments, and organizations around the world. Eve is the founder and executive director of Food for Climate. She's an author, Forbes contributor, and journalist whose work focuses on how food culture is a powerful lever for improving mental, physical, and environmental health. Her latest book is Hungry, Avocado Toast, Instagram Influencers, and Our Search for Connection and Meaning. We're so pleased to have Eve join us today for this Regenerative Slam to present the Food for Climate League's toolkit, How to Talk About Food and Climate. Welcome, Eve.
Thanks so much for having me. I was loving that conversation with Brian. That is completely up our alley. I am just gonna, jump right in because it seems like the conversation was already where I was going to take it. And Elizabeth, thank you very much for that introduction. I am the founder and executive director of Food for Climate League. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and I'm also an author. I have spent the last decade doing research mainly into millennial and Gen Z food trends all around the world, looking into the why behind food trends, really digging into emotionally, why is it that we're spending our discretionary time and income on food? And with Food for Climate League, I'm taking that decade of research and applying it to the sustainable food movement. Food for Climate League was founded in 2019. As Elizabeth mentioned, we want to reframe what climate smart eating is in order to make it easy and alluring to partake in and to make these habits relevant to a wider swath of the global community. Our goal—
Hey, Eve, do you have slides right now?
I do. Oh,
we can't see them.
This is like a perfect example of the Zoom era. I was clicking through the slides for myself. Present,
no worries.
Share screen. All right, thanks Paige for chiming in. You guys didn't miss much. You missed my face in a book. That's pretty much it. And so Food for Climate League, we're creating tested narratives. So you guys were talking about creating this kind of general narrative that people can really organize around as it relates to regenerative. That's exactly what it is that we aim to do, but we are prototyping. We're doing deep human-centered insight interviews. We're then creating prototypes, testing it, and then dispersing them in order to create this new food culture that is really celebrating the foods that are delicious, that are healthy, that are Instagram worthy, but also great for the planet. I work with a spectacular team who I feel absolutely honored to work amongst every single day. We are an entirely female-led team with myself, Sophie Egan is our director of strategy, Chiara Cecchini. We work in direct coordination with a nonprofit organization called Future Food Institute, who has a specialty in rapid prototyping and product design. And this is our ecosystem. We have been lucky enough to receive our original funding from Google. Last year, ran a number of research sprints with Unilever, with Sodexo, and we were able to run the trainings with grant funding from Eat the Change. We also are doing our research in partnership as well with Menus of Change and Data Central. And here's the setting. People are obsessed with food, right? Young people especially are spending a record amount of their discretionary time and income on food. Even during the pandemic, restaurant spending is back up amongst that one small demographic, or I should say large. And people are really concerned about the climate crisis. Yet, sustainable food and beverage products and campaigns are not earning the traction that they should be. They're remaining niche instead of the norm. And we as an organization aim to solve that. We think that a lot of the problem really is around the way that we talk about sustainable foods, sustainable items. And we also think that right now, at this very moment, is the time when we need to be shifting the way that we are talking about these things. While it might not on the surface seem like a great moment, if you talk to any marketer, they will say that the best time to create new behaviors is during a moment of disruption. Usually they'll say target people when they're getting married, graduated from college. Well, guess what? The entire world right now is in a moment of disruption. And we have seen how rapidly behavior can change just in the last year. So we really think that as those who are invested in the sustainable food movement, we need to be capitalizing on this moment to really hold people's hands and allow them to take on behaviors that are good for them physically, also good for them emotionally, and good for the planet. The other part of this is that democratizing the sustainable food movement, which is really what we're all about, is in and of itself a form of social justice. We have an opportunity to be widening the scope, the appeal of these ways of eating to speak to a more diverse audience and make the food and climate narrative relevant and accessible to eaters of all colors, all backgrounds, allow people to actually feel empowered personally as well as for their own communities. The other thing that I find particularly exciting about this moment, and I hope that this gives all of you a bit of hope as well, is that interest and concern about the climate crisis actually went up over this past year. A lot of people said, oh, we're all going to be just super concerned about ourselves, our own personal health, when in reality, people have actually become more alarmed about the climate crisis. And this is, again, something that we can take and harness and say, well, how do we take this concern and give people a direct tool for action? I don't really need to go into this because everyone on this call already knows food can save the earth for us. It is one of the most powerful, magical tools that we have out there, and we need to be pulling on that lever more effectively. But it's really hard to connect the dots. Why? First, regenerative agriculture, sustainable agriculture, it's complex, right? The story is going to change depending on what crop you're growing, what the season is, where you are in the world. Second, climate content triggers very difficult emotions in people. And for me personally, this has been the most interesting part of our research as an organization, talking to climate psychologists, climate communications experts, and really thinking about what are the ways that we can avoid these common emotional triggers that make people feel anxious or guilty or filled with a sense of grief. And then, of course, if we're asking people to change what they're eating, that's really personal, right? Food is a core part of our identities. Now, Food for Climate League, in our foundational research conducted in 2019, we did an assessment of how the industry, food, beverage, NGOs, are currently talking about these key food and climate concepts, including regenerative. And we were able to identify a few mistaken assumptions. One is that everyone will take action around the climate if they're just educated about it. Statistics and education alone are not enough to drive behavior change. It's important to provide people with the information, but that in and of itself is not going to do it. Right? Think about all the times you've been told that a certain food is not good for your health, but you're going to indulge in it anyway. We are complex beings. Number two is that sustainable goods and practices can only resonate with a small portion of the population. We really saw that the vast majority of sustainable food communications were targeting white, wealthy, and mainly Western audiences. Those are not the only people who are interested in eating in a climate smart way. And we need to be, again, democratizing our approach. Number three, and this is really important, is that you have to talk about the climate to create climate beneficial behavior change. What we learned is that sometimes it's best not to bring up the climate at all because it's going to be triggering a lot of those difficult emotions in people, and instead connect the dots between the ways that sustainable eating can make you feel more empowered over your own health and well-being, allow you to eat in an affordable way, allow you to make connections with your community. There are so many different benefits to these ways of eating, and it's time that we start celebrating them. So we as an organization, we want to help companies or other organizations, governments alike, generate wider interest and engagement around sustainable foods and campaigns to create new trends and amplify a common language to increase sales of goods, sustainable goods and campaigns. So we as an organization have a list of 10 best practices. We, in our toolkit, which I'm about to jump into, are really helping organizations implement these best practices in their own communications. We also have a full report if anyone is interested in really digging into this. There's 65 pages worth of content going through our research, and more is available on our website. But so this is the toolkit that Elizabeth was talking about, and we're really proud of the work that we've done as an organization. Trying to get not just do research for research's sake, but we want everybody to be implementing these learnings. There's no point in doing the research if it's not being put to good use. So this workshop's goal really is to promote climate smart food products and campaigns in a new way, to catalyze wider impact and engagement, to drive a more biodiverse, zero waste, nutrient-rich, plant-forward food system for all. And this is how the workshop generally goes. We help you all define your audience, who's going to see this content, Where are they? Next step, excluding the language that might be turning people off. And this is a big, big part of our process. Really looking at what in your language is framed in the negative, what's cueing loss, what might be triggering difficult emotions in people. There's a lot of language that all of us use all the time without realizing that we might be turning someone off. Things that are kind of baked into the way that a lot of us approach this topic that for us is not off-putting, but for others it may be. Then we help you go through and think about, what should you be celebrating? What's in here that really needs to be added in? How can you talk about the people, the places, production practices, the feelings that this food or experience is going to elicit? What are words you can embed in here that's going to cue a sense of community or transparency or purpose? And then we help you put it all together in order to optimize, again, these food and climate communications in order to reach a wider swath of people. The workshop we run is super quick. It's getting you kind of in that mindset of rethinking how you approach. Now, at the end, you end up with something like this. You have your original text on one side and then your new description on another. We've been hearing amazing things from people. I can say, as the founder of this organization, I'm very proud of the work that our team has done. We're going to continue to improve on this, make it stronger and stronger the more people we can expose to this. But this is just the response we got from our February training of people feeling confident about being able to effectively communicate around climate smart food offerings. So I went through a lot of this really quickly because I was focused on the time, but I also want to have some time to answer questions if anyone is eager. But we are here to support the sustainable food movement. We want to empower each and every one of you to really reach your goals, reach more people, create food and climate communications that are going to resonate with the masses. And you have my contact information there on the screen if you want to reach out.
Yeah, Eve, leave that up for a minute. And so somebody's asking, when is your next training or workshop?
So we don't have a public one scheduled at the moment, but we are kind of looking for new opportunities, new collaboratives, really. So we worked with Climate Collaborative for one, and then also WBCSD, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, for another. If anyone else actually knows of coalitions of companies who would be interested in this kind of training, then the next step is finding the grant funding in order to run one of them. It's not that much. We already have the toolkit ready to go. And our mission is get this into the hands of as many people as possible so that these practices can start being implemented as soon as possible.
During the Climate Collaborative workshop that you hosted, the attendants actually went through the workbook together. And so I would suggest to everybody, it's kind of a self-study opportunity. And where can people find the workbook, Eve? Is it foodforclimateleague.org that they should go to see it?
So we don't currently have the workbook available for download, but that is something that we are working on right now. We're actually looking at whether or not we can make it an interactive online. So for now, we're doing it kind of with these more intimate groups, I'd say a cap of 100 people, working into different, much smaller breakout groups. And we're finding that this is working really effectively. We're actually also in conversation right now about whether you need to have the live conversation in order to make this most effective. So it's still something that we're figuring out as an organization. And Elizabeth, honestly, if you have feedback, I'm all here. I'm all ears.
Well, I think I'm so sorry I didn't figure this out first. I think that it's probably available through the Climate Collaborative. I bet you that there's a recording of the day that you did that would take people through it that way.
Yes, for sure.
And it sounds like you're totally open to organizations and groups and companies contacting you and reaching out.
100%. We're happy to organize something for an individual company, or if there's a group of companies that want to come together, we can run something that way. So absolutely.
Fantastic. And I would expect you have a e-newsletter that people can sign up for, so that if you do announce that you're going to make it available.
Yes, you can sign up at foodforclimateleague.org. Just type in your name and we will get in touch when there's additional opportunities that arise.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Eve. And moreover, thank you for developing this kind of technology and really getting it out there in the world. We really appreciate it. It certainly is timely.
You all are doing super important work, and we just want to support you in your success. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eve. We really appreciate it.
Selene, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Dr. Armando Medinaceli, who's a Bolivian ethnobiologist who collaborates with indigenous people in Bolivia, Mexico, and Guatemala. He's the education director at Natives, the North American Traditional Indigenous Food Systems Organization, whose mission is to promote indigenous foodways, education, and facilitate indigenous food access. Armando also teaches at the undergraduate and graduate levels in the US and Bolivia. He's here today to deliver a regenerative slam, Reconnecting to Native Foodways. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate the invitation for this wonderful conversation. And yes, I want to share a little bit of the type of work, the work we're doing at Natives. Natives is a nonprofit organization that we're based here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Anyway, I hope you can see that. Anyway, so thank you again. And like you said, my name is Armando. I'm from Bolivia. I go by Mandu because it's a little bit easier. And I work at Natives. But anyway, so our work at Natives, like you also mentioned, the mission of our organization is, excuse me, it's to promote indigenous foodways and to facilitate, to promote indigenous foodways education and facilitate indigenous food access. So that's the main goal. So it's, as you can see, it's a really big and really broad goal that we are aiming for. And yeah. So as part of that, a lot of the work we do, it's understanding the whole concept of foodways. And to do that, we use like the most holistic approach to understanding foodways, that we borrow this kind of definition from social science. I say that foodways includes the cultural, social, and economic practices relating to food production and consumption of food. So that's kind of how we see foodways. So it's everything that is related to food in general, and understanding that it's such an important component of who we are. So we try to highlight a lot the cultural side of food. We want to emphasize that culture, food, it's a very important part of culture, almost as important as our language. So that being said, it shows that food is going to help us even identify who we are. You know, it represents who we are, represents our land, and it defines us in different ways as individuals and as groups in general. So within the organization, this is a little bit how we created this diagram to understand a little bit the foundations of an indigenous food system model when we're talking about food systems. So as you can see, I'm not going to read the whole thing, you can just take a look. We are trying to accommodate and incorporate every time we're talking about indigenous foodways or foodways in general, we're trying to understand that there is a very strong relation between the plants, the animals, all the elements, but also all the indigenous knowledge that is related to the environment and to all these things. And when we talk about indigenous knowledge, we're talking like a huge package of things as well that includes indigenous histories, languages, stories, songs, and music and all of that, and also like the spirituality, the traditions, the rituals, the myths that are related to the land, that are related to the different ingredients that are part of our foods and all of that. And all of that related to all the knowledge surrounding about plants and animals. So it's understanding not only what animals we have in our environments, but also like how to use them, how Mother Earth is providing those animals, those plants for us to actually use them in certain ways that are culturally appropriate and at the same time sustainable and beneficial for all of us. You know? So as part of our work, we're trying to create this idea of share this idea of indigenous food systems by the removal of colonized thought in a way. So we are in the running kitchen that we have, for instance, we don't use any colonial ingredients. We're not using any wheat. We don't use any dairy products. We don't use any sugar, and we don't use any chicken, beef, or pork. We have other alternatives that are more local, that are more environmentally sound to this particular area of the world that we use and are extremely beneficial for all of us. And also, as I said, we're trying to reconnect through education, through research and education. We're trying to show people how you can reconnect a little bit with your environment and recreate a little bit this spirituality, this spiritual connection that traditionally we have with our environment and with our foods in general. And so anyway, so it's like a very holistic approach to understanding food waste in general. And now, as one of the biggest project that we have within Natives right now, it's the Indigenous Food Lab, which is a kitchen, a running kitchen that we have, and it's located in the Midtown Global Market here, very close to downtown Minneapolis. And it's a kitchen that it started, it's the whole thing, the whole organization is very new. We are only about 7 to 8 months old, so we are very new in this. The kitchen has been working since August last year with the intention of becoming a culinary training center in which people can come and learn about indigenous foods, learn about indigenous ingredients, how to use them, how to prepare them, but also learning, understanding how to run a kitchen, how to become a chef, how to create an organization and develop your own organization as well. Obviously supporting as much as possible Native American communities and anybody who is interested on this. But because of the pandemic, we had to switch gears a little bit. And so all the culinary training or all the training aspect of the kitchen right now, it's put on hold for a minute because of the pandemic. And we decided to use the resources we have in the kitchen, all the wonderful staff that we have, to actually do something that is more useful right now, because responding to the pandemic, because as everybody knows, because of the pandemic, we started realizing how many people have such a difficulty accessing food, just getting some food into their mouths every day. So through different support from the local tribes here in Minnesota and other organizations, we developed a program in which we were preparing a lot of foods for different people in need during the pandemic. So to give you an example, for instance, between August and November last year, we had a program in which we were cooking about 300 to 400 bowls of meat a day, so a total of almost 13,000 bowls that were distributed to different people in need, but also we were distributing a lot of the homeless encampments that we found here around the city, because we knew that those people were having a really hard time accessing to good food. And all the food that we've been producing, it's been based on indigenous recipes that are created by our indigenous chefs in the Indigenous Food Lab. So we are using only indigenous ingredients, only local ingredients, sourced as much as possible from local producers, indigenous producers. And so creating recipes that are extremely healthy and delicious and nutritious for all these people, and in a way to feed them properly, but at the same time showing them that we can use indigenous ingredients, local ingredients to get like a really good diet. And then after, or starting in November, we switched gears a little bit and we had more, we get more in connection with a lot of the tribes in the state of Minnesota. So we were collaborating with 9 of the 11 tribes here in the state. And through the CARES program from the government and stuff, we got some funding. So we were able to support those communities, and we decided to switch gears a little bit for fall and winter. And we've been producing, instead of producing these bowls of meat, we decided to start producing some soups. And between November and February of this year, we've been producing at a rate of 10,000 soups a week. So in total, we produced almost 79,000 soups that were, as I said, distributed to 9 of the 11 Native American tribes here in Minnesota, sorry. And all of them, again, they are soups there. We developed 17 different types of soups based on indigenous ingredients that our chefs in the kitchen were developing and by trying and testing and different things and creating these delicious soups that are extremely delicious, super yummy, but at the same time, very nutritious, very rich, very good. And at the same time, some of them, they have some medicinal properties as well. And so, And more importantly, they also have like a very important cultural component. So a lot of these foods, they are like culturally appropriate for the indigenous tribes that we've been working with. So they felt more comfortable eating these foods and stuff because it's foods that make sense to them. They are ingredients that grow right there where in their land, and they're familiar with it, even though some of them, they're kind of losing some of the connection with all of these ingredients and stuff. But so while we were producing these foods, we decided we started thinking and said, like, we should do a little more than just sending food to people, which is a wonderful thing. But knowing that we're using a lot of indigenous ingredients, we should try to share that knowledge a little bit with people as well. So as part of the education and research department of the organization, we decided to create this one-sheet insert that we included every week, in which we share a little bit of information about the ingredients that we've been using that week, and also like sharing some other information about different topics that are relevant to indigenous foods, indigenous knowledge, and even bigger topics related how talking about indigenous foodways, how talking about indigenous ingredients, it has a very strong relation to topics like they were mentioned before of sustainability and climate change, but also engaging into a bigger conversations such as the ones of food sovereignty and stuff like that. So yeah, we were sharing a little bit. We decided to share a little more information with them. So besides the food, they get also some information firsthand about the things that they're eating. And right now, we are in the process of finishing a recipe booklet in which we're including all these 17 soup recipes that they've been receiving, that these people was receiving between November and February. So we developed that into a little booklet in a simple format. So we're going to share that in the next couple of weeks to all the people who received these soups. So now they also have access to the recipes and they can recreate all the soups. They can actually reproduce them whenever they want. So that's part of what the Indigenous Food Lab has been doing. But again, we also have like this education and research department that we were trying to document and create materials that can be useful, educational for people to understand this whole process, this whole idea of thinking about foodways and how are we approaching it and how important it is. So as part of that, we've been developing a lot of different educational material for all ages. Like this is just 2 examples of some readers that we created for elementary school kids. One that it's focusing on squashes and the varieties of squashes that we have in the US, and including the indigenous names of the squashes, including like a little history of it and like the cultural aspect of it, how indigenous groups, Native Americans used to traditionally use it and dry it and prepare it and all of that. And also we have another one on wild rice that it's kind of the same idea, understanding a little bit what wild rice is so important and the cultural importance of wild rice for a lot of tribes here in Minnesota, especially in some parts of Wisconsin and Canada as well. But sharing a lot of that, including some hands-on activities for the kids as well, so they can actually learn how to do certain things with these ingredients as well. So for instance, for the squash, we had these activities for elementary school kids, especially K-2 to 2nd grade. We teach them a little bit how to roast pumpkin seeds, something so simple, you know, but when we go a little bit older, we have different activities that how to make a pumpkin soup using only indigenous ingredients. We have more activities that relate to creating some cedar and conifer teas, for instance, that it's a way to share different types of way of reconnecting with your food as well, you know, trying to, again, motivate people to engage, to really connect with their land, connect with their food, instead of this mere transaction that we have nowadays in the grocery store. So we're trying to encourage people to understand what you have around you, what's in your neighborhood. You can walk around and maybe you'll find some trees that are actually food or that are actually medicinal, and you can use part of that, and you can start understanding your environment in a different way through the lens of foodways. And as part of the education as well, we've been offering a lot of presentations to talk about this, to share this philosophy, this view of understanding foodways, indigenous foodways. We've been invited to participate in panels, and we developed our own panels to discuss topics of food sovereignty, sustainability, in ways that one of the things that I want to focus a lot is, and want to make sure that people understand that when we talk about these things, when we're talking about food sovereignty, when we're talking about indigenous foods and indigenous foodways and climate change and sustainability, you don't need to be an expert to be part of it, to contribute to it. So that's something that we're trying to do, develop all this material and all this philosophy so people can understand and see that everybody can contribute to this. Everybody can be part of these movements of food sovereignty or anything else. So as part of that, we're also developing workshops that are internal and external. So we've been having already a few workshops that we're we're oriented for our own team, our own staff. So our staff, it's in constant training as well of understanding all this philosophy, all these concepts as well. So they feel more prepared even to talk about their foods when they're preparing them, when they're creating the recipes and all of that. And we've been also giving guest lectures at different universities and other places, and even in other countries, we've been invited for that. And as part of the whole thing, we are also engaging in a lot of research. We're trying to develop a very strong research component of our work because we want to document really solid information that we can transform that into education material, and more importantly, we can translate it in a sense into a language that it's accessible to everybody. It's not just for experts, it's not just for academics, it's for everybody can be part of this. So we are doing some research right now. We are documenting, creating a database of all indigenous ingredients that we're using, highlighting like the traditional uses of them, like the traditional ways of understanding those, the meanings of those for the Native Americans that use them traditionally. We are researching about traditional ways of seed keeping, because it's such an important thing to maintain and make sure that we have the seeds, that we're keeping them for next generations and all of that. Foraging techniques, hunting, fishing, and sharing, all these different practices that are always related to food. And we want to make sure to understand and have a lot of information that we can share with the public. And as part of that, also, we are developing this, what we call the cultural plant and animal profiles, in which we are developing very short 2-3 page, pamphlets or something that share the information about the ingredients that we're using in the kitchen, so people can have easy access with very good information about the indigenous ingredients in this particular region for now, but hopefully we want to expand more to everywhere, as much as possible. And so that's what we've been doing so far here at Native. So there's a lot more to do. There's a lot more that we want to do. We want to engage in more of this type of conversations, because we think that it's really important, really relevant that people start understanding that we have to think about the cultural side of food. When we think about food, when we talk about ingredients, we need to consider like what is around us. We need to understand what food means to us. Like I was saying, walk around your neighbor and start being curious and learn about the plants that are out there. Learn how they can be food maybe that you could be using and you don't even realize they're right there, But anyway, so I don't want to extend too much because time goes quick. And I just wanted to show you a little example of some of the recipes that some of our chefs have been developing. So this is one that it's a maple glazed roasted acorn squash with toasted pepitas. So just by the name of it, you can realize that how yummy that is. It's a very, and if you see the ingredients and everything, it's just really, really good ingredients. And you see that this is like a really healthy soup, and it's like an incredibly delicious on top of it, And I have another one here that it's a lake trout and leek. So it's a combination of different ingredients that we can find locally here, that we can source them, and you can create different delicious food that is, again, as I said, really good for you. It's really nutritional. It's everything you wanted, and it's pretty much when you follow an indigenous diet, you are kind of doing what every other diet is aspiring to be, because we are talking about a diet that it's dairy free, that it's gluten free, that it's everything free, basically. And it's like at the same time extremely delicious, extremely good, and it's supporting the big things that are relevant for our world in general, So it's supporting sustainability, it's supporting these movements against to mitigate climate change. And it's also supporting this whole movement of food sovereignty that is really, really relevant. And yeah, so that's all I wanted to share to you today. And like, this is the website. You can look at the type of things that we're doing. You can find a little more information. Like I said, we are a very new organization, so things are developing. We are working on it. And I just put my email there as well, because I'm more than happy to answer any questions through email or connect, hopefully get to a position in which we can collaborate with other people, or if it's just simply answering questions or whatever, I'm more than happy to do so. So
Awesome.
yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mandu. That was absolutely fabulous. And I'm just going to share this incredible cookbook, which the founder of that organization, Sean Sherman, I can't talk right now for some reason, but I am very inspired by the unique recipes that are in that book. Thank you so much. All right, so we're going to move to our next program or panel. So I'd like to introduce Zainab Anez, who is the communications manager of Heal Food Alliance. Zainab grew up in Kerala, India, and started her career as a journalist there. She is now here in the US and is part of the Heal Food Alliance, which is a national multi-sector, multiracial coalition of 55 organizations. And it's a membership-led group representing over 2 million rural and urban farmers, ranchers, fishers, farm and food chain workers, indigenous groups, scientists, public health advocates, and many more. Which is interesting from yesterday's keynote with Chris Newman is that he shared that whole power of collective engagement. So it's beautiful to see this is an organization that's really leaning into that understanding. So I want to welcome Zainab, so happy to have you moderate this very special panel, which is very dear to my heart, Transformative Relationship as Story. This is really how action is born through authentic relationship. There really is no other path that will lead us to meaningful change than coming together and doing important work. We will have Q&A following the Transformative Relationship as Story panel. So as you hear things in this conversation, please do put those in the chat. Welcome to this esteemed group. I cannot wait to hear this conversation.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Armando, for that incredibly educational and inspirational talk. We're honored to follow you. And welcome everyone to Transformative Relationships as Story. My name is Zainab, and as Celine mentioned, I represent the Heal Food Alliance, which is a multiracial coalition of food and farm organizations who are all coming together to build a movement to transform our food and farm systems from the current extractive model towards one that's regenerative, centers community well-being, and care for the land. I'm very excited to be here with 6 panelists who are each pursuing their own vision for transformation in their own companies and communities. We'll get to hear from each of them in the next hour. And we do have Q&A in the end, so feel free to pop in questions in the chat and we'll get to all of them during Q&A. And as always, quick disclaimer that this is all virtual, so your patience and tolerance is much appreciated should we have any technical difficulties. I also want to recognize that yesterday we received the verdict over the murder of George Floyd. I understand that some of the partnerships that are represented in this panel were forged directly as a result of the uprisings that followed George Floyd's murder, while all are aimed at creating a more racially equitable food system. So let's all recognize that and take space to hold that as we move through the panel. And on that note, I'd like to open the session by acknowledging the Ohlone people, who are the original stewards of the region in and around what is now known as San Francisco, where I'm based. And I want to acknowledge their enduring connection to this land and offer my respect to and celebrate their strength and resilience through 2 centuries of persecution and genocide. I want to offer them gratitude for stewarding this land and for preserving plant communities that would otherwise have disappeared, for managing its forests. With that, I want to affirm my commitment to the work of decolonization and to stand with indigenous movements for sovereignty and self-determination across the country. We're all spread across the breadth of the United States. So I invite everyone to follow this link, and let me just put that in the chat. And learn about the native land that you are on, and spend a moment reflecting on the original stewards of the land that you live, work, and farm on. And feel free to share that in the chat if you like. And with that, let's introduce the wonderful panel. It's a big panel. We have 6 people who we're all very excited to hear from. I want to open it up. I would love for the panel to introduce themselves. If we could start with Dawn and Chris. And if one of you could also briefly share about the partnership that you're working on, that would be great. Dawn, do you want to kick it off?
Mitakiape. My name's Dawn Sherman. I'm the CEO of Native American Natural Foods. And as many of you know, are the creators of the Tonka Bar Bites and Sticks that you see on the shelves and online. And I'll just let you know, it's been a 14-year journey with Native American Natural Foods and Tonka Bar, with quite a few ups and downs, and a lot of lessons that we've learned being in what is the natural food industry and what it means to bring healthy foods to your communities and also nationwide, and the roadblocks and, some of the injustices that we have seen as a brand. So I appreciate your introduction. And also I did want to recognize the land that I'm currently on. I'm in Texas right now. So I'm currently sitting on Comanche, Kickapoo, and Kiowa land. So I do want to recognize that as we move forward there. And I also represent the Lakota, Lenape, and Shawnee tribes. And I'll let Chris go from there.
Morning. My name's Chris Olivier. I'm the general manager for Diamond Ranch, which is a pork and beef company supporting 750 independent family farmers and ranchers around the country. And just a real quick summary on our journey with Don and Mark. I mean, it started with Marilyn Noble, who many of you may know, is an author and journalist. She wrote an article about really the first, 12 years of Tonka's journey and what happened. And she introduced us to Mark and to Don, and they walked us through the challenges that they're facing. And one thing that we remember is 15 years ago at Diamond Ranch, it was unclear if Diamond was going to survive. We were a small company competing with much larger, better funded companies. And, we were fortunate. We had some benefits that quite frankly, Native American Natural Foods did not. Number one being access to capital. And, Dawn and her team did a tremendous job raising money. We spent 9 months working on how do we work together. We're not in a position to provide funding, but we are willing to invest a tremendous amount of time with our team to do one thing, which is to help Native American Natural Foods regain momentum. And then we want to get out of the way. So that's the origins of our partnership. And it's been, something I've really enjoyed.
Thank you both. And we're excited to learn more in the next hour. I'd encourage folks to also check out that article. I believe it's in Modern Farmer, correct? It's a really interesting origin story. But if I could quickly pass the mic to Angela and Penny to introduce themselves and talk about what they're building together.
Go ahead, Angela. I'll let you go first.
All right, I'll get started. All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Angela Dawson. I'm the founder and president of the 40 Acre Cooperative. 40 Acre Co-op is a national co-op headquartered here in northern Minnesota. Where we're located is on beautiful Anishinaabe Waki land. And my farm actually was actually just recently, I purchased it about a year ago, but it was just recently taken from the Federal Reserve in 1980. So it hasn't even been in operation with the rest of the town here. It's a beautiful swath of land, and I really honor it, especially the beautiful trees that talk to us. And so really thankful to be here with Penny and to tell our story of the 40-acre co-op. I should just say, we have members in 7 states and 1 tribal territory and another 1 onboarding in the cooperative membership. And we're working to create equity and generational wealth with Black and Indigenous farmers using hemp and cannabis as a catalyst. So I'm thankful to be here, and I'm happy to share our story.
And hi, I'm Penny Tompkins. I'm the manager of CSR at Charlotte's Web, which is a hemp company selling CBD products all across the US. I'm located in Boulder, Colorado, and our land is on the former lands of the Utes, the Cheyenne, and the Arapaho. We're here because we formed a partnership with Angela Dawson and the co-op as a direct result of the murder of George Floyd. We made a commitment following that event in June to seek a mentorship program with a Black entrepreneur or farmer in the hemp community. And I think Angela and I would both say we've had a lot of like kismet in our relationship. I happened to be looking at an industry journal shortly after we made that commitment and saw an article that featured Angela. I reached out to her and we started a process of just learning about one another's organizations and what we were trying to accomplish. And we were fortunate enough in February during Black History Month to announce our mentorship program. We're very excited to be working with Angela. She has a wealth of knowledge about the systemic racism of Black farming in the US, as well as her own experiences. And she's very involved in advocacy work and policy work, both in Minnesota as well as with the USDA. Similar to what Chris said, we weren't able to provide funding, but we're here to provide internal expertise and education for her farmers, as well as to amplify the work that she's doing throughout any relationships that we have in our external community. And so we're just delighted to be here and talk further about the great relationship that we have. And I know that yesterday was a very stressful day, especially for Angela and her community, and we are grateful for the outcome that we saw yesterday.
Thank you, Penny. I love that both partnerships were a result of reading something or like reading something in a journal or a magazine. And I feel like it's really apt that, storytelling was kind of the start of your relationships, especially because that's what this panel is about. And with that, I'll kick it to Allison and Tyson.
Great, thank you. I can start and then I'll kick it over to Tyson. My name is Allison Chachuga. I'm the Director of Social Impact and Sustainability at Gaia Herbs, and Gaia Herbs is an herbal supplement company. We're located in Western North Carolina on the traditional lands of the Cherokee. The Eastern Band of Cherokee are still located here, and actually that's who Tyson is affiliated with. I'll let him introduce himself in a moment. And I think really our partnership is born out of the shared belief of re-envisioning our future. And I know this is a very big comment, but this is really being looked at through the preservation and dissemination of traditional ecological knowledge from the Cherokee and from Tyson's family specifically, through collaboration around food and herbal medicine sovereignty, through reconnection with each other and with nature. Our partnership was activated through Gaia Herbs' social impact program called Gaia Roots, which was formed in 2018 and supports herbal access and regenerative farming and food access in traditionally under-supported communities. And being that Gaia Herbs is located on the Aboriginal land of the Cherokee, this partnership just feels very significant to me and to many Gaians, and is really in its infancy. We began our partnership last year when Tyson and his family came out to the Gaia Herbs farm to present on a 2-day workshop on traditional food crops and farming, and really native systems, native belief systems, through another mutual partner called the Organic Growers School. And as the day went on and our conversations continued, like Penny mentioned, there was just a lot of synergy and desire for us to keep this partnership going. So here we are. And from our perspective too, this is about amplifying the work that Tyson and his family is doing, amplifying traditional wisdom around nature and food and herbal medicine, and the connection that we have to each other and the land, and really seeing where we can bring this. So I'll leave it there and pass it over to Tyson.
Shio Nagada. Hello, everyone. My name is Tyson Sampson. And I am working with my auntie, Amy Walker. She's sitting right here with me. And also our other relatives, Charles, Taylor, and my cousin, Missy Crow or Mary Crow. And we have been doing several presentations around the types of food systems that we already have carried on in our families, but they're not carried on by everyone in the community because of assimilation and acculturation. I identified several years ago that there were people of my age who still could not identify our staple foods, like our spring wild greens and some of our mushrooms throughout the season. So that's where a lot of this inspiration came from, was to make sure that people in our community, which is an indigenous community, we are an Indian boundary, and we call ourselves an Indian reservation, but we actually paid for our land back in the 1860s. So we're one of very few Indian boundaries in this nation. And so just to briefly highlight the different types of, we've been doing food demonstrations, and we demonstrate how to skin our traditional corn that Aunt Amy grows by boiling it in wood ashes, and making the traditional dumplings that our families love and rely on, but so many people have gotten away from it. The more we share this food and provide it for family dinners and fundraisers and things like that, the more people are just raving about our wild and indigenous foods. And so that's what we do. We grow traditional foods, and we gather wild foods and medicines, and our focus is to conserve our land and foodways, like I said, as well as to share our knowledge with tribal members and all who want to learn. Another inspiration has come from working and collaborating with the Tribe's Natural Resources Department and the U.S. Forest Service about our sustainable and ethical harvesting methods, especially for ramps, and another green that we call Sochan. And so out of this, we interviewed about 40 people from the community the first year, which was in 2016. And it was resoundingly impressive that a lot of our tribal people had the same knowledge. Out of 40 people, about 95% of their knowledge was consistent, but they were all like middle-aged to elder people, and a lot of those people we interviewed have already passed away. So for me, I feel like we're kind of like running against the clock. Not that it's competition, but the more that we return this traditional ecological knowledge to our people, which is where it came from originally and inherently, then, you know, the more that we will all continue to thrive as a nation. And so I just want to let my Aunt Amy introduce herself, and we'll be available for Q&A later. So go ahead, Auntie.
Good afternoon. My name is Awi Edohe, And I was born here on the Kuala boundary, but my mom and dad moved to Tennessee, and that's where I grew up. But I came back in my later years and established my life here amongst my people. And that's where I began to just learn more about sustainability and gathering, because that's what my mom did. She knew all of those things. My dad came from Rosebud, South Dakota, and he was an herbalist as well. But my mom in this part of the country knew more about the plants that the Cherokees used. And so that's how he provided for us. There was 5 boys and 3 girls in my family, and I'm the second oldest child. And I've lost 3 of my brothers already in my time. But I've been farming since '98. That was before I retired from my job as a social worker. But I just picked up where my mom left off. She's been gone about 32 years now, I think. And as children, we had to grow our own food because I lost our dad when I was 10, and we had to feed ourselves. And so we always gathered and fished and had a garden, canning, and all of those things that in order to survive over the winter, because my mom never had a regular job. And so I hated it when I was younger. But then I realized as I'd gotten older that this was terribly important. And I started farming before I even retired. And now I have my own tractor and tools to plow and disc and plant in the soil. And we have the piece of property the tribe was able to reacquire in '95 called the Mother Town. And all of us Cherokees know it as the first village of all Cherokee people. And so that is where I was able to get a little plot of land. I have 4 acres that I farm right now. And but being born in 1941, I'm getting on up there in age, but I guess my mind still remembers so much about planting and growing. And but my body can't do much of it anymore. But I have help. But I have hung on to 2 things that is our traditional corn and a special bean. We call it an October bean. Those 2 things that I protect those seeds as best I know how, because I know that some of these seed companies would want to mess with them and change them, and it would no longer be the bean that our ancestors has always planted. And out of the corn that I raised. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Amy. And we'd love to hear more about this critical and important work that you and Tyson are doing to protect, preserve, and share traditional knowledge. And we'll get to all that in a few minutes. But
okay, that's fine.
Just to kick off this conversation about transformative partnerships, we have a wide array of experiences here from different parts of the food world. But the reason you're all here together on this panel is because you've entered into these partnerships with each other with the goal of pursuing systemic change and preserving traditional wisdom. And I want to start with Angela and Penny, because as Penny mentioned, your partnership came out of Charlotte Webb's 10 Commitments to Black Lives. Relational work is hard and building trust is difficult, especially given the context in which we're doing this work. How did you decide that this was the right partnership to enter into? And how did you then nurture and build this partnership?
Well, go ahead, Angela.
I was going to say, did you want to kick off since you kind of, yeah.
Sure. So, Charlotte's Web, we are farmers. That's how our company was started. It was started by, a family of 7 brothers, and they were growing medical cannabis back in the, early 20-aughts, 2010, 2012. And so that's our heritage. Farming was our heritage, and we still continue to this day to grow all of our own hemp that we use to manufacture our products. We do not outsource to other organizations. So it was just really a very simple, idea. Once we found Angela and we started talking about her co-op and the farmers there and she has a hemp program, it really was just a natural fit for us. And as you'll learn more from Angela, I mean, she's just exceptional in what she's trying to accomplish. And we knew that we could support her efforts and have a successful partnership.
And likewise, I mean, I think the relationship building, the time that Charlotte's Web has taken just in reaching out to me and actually being quite persistent, because when they first reached out last year, I wasn't so active on social media, LinkedIn and that kind of stuff. And that's where I found later where some of the other, where the initial contact started. And I also got an email and a voicemail, both from, I think, Penny and some folks on her team. And we didn't make any assumptions at the beginning of our relationship. We really just completely committed to exploring. And so as we found some small wins that we could achieve through this exploration, we did build trust by, finding small things that were to move with. And so, creating space for each other to explore different elements of our business and how those things match up with what we want to see in the world. And so it did come together quite organically, if I should say, use that term in this conference. It was really natural and just is still continuing to be that way, right? We haven't really defined a whole lot of things right now. We just kind of are talking about a mentorship program, but we're still leaving space for exploring what's right for us. And I think that's how we're building trust.
Thank you. And Allison, Tyson, and Amy, yours is also a more recent partnership. Do you have any reflections on?
Yeah, I think I'll start and pass it over to Tyson and Amy. But really similarly, leaning into what makes the most sense. And so with our partnership, as I mentioned, Tyson and Amy and Mary and Charles came out to the Gaia Farm for a 2-day workshop. And I mean, from my perspective, Indigenous wisdom is, and I think from many of our perspectives, is the answer to so many of our crises right now: biodiversity loss, climate change, reconnecting back to ourselves, to nature, and working at an herbal supplement company. The connection with plants is really important for us. And so I think building trust has really been about conversations and taking our time and not rushing into having some, structure of this is what we need to follow, but just talking what's happening in your world and our world, and what can we do to push that forward, and seeing the opportunities and building from there. Tyson and Amy, I'll pass it over to you if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I think that by, coming together as one mind in our presentation, the ulterior motive for me when we came to Gaia was, oh, wow, this is an opportunity for us to document what we can demonstrate and share in terms of information and wisdom and practices, and that this would be, when I first mentioned it to Aunt Amy and to my cousin Missy, and also to Charles, was I said, for one, this is an opportunity to educate white people. And number two, this is an opportunity to document and have basically like a documentary style file for after we pass away. And because and Amy is a great grandmother, and I have nieces and nephews, and Missy has children that are adult age now, and they're hungry for these lifeways. Like, and Amy was talking earlier, I call them living systems and lifeways, because our culture is a form of permaculture. I'm also working on a collaboration entitled Decolonizing Permaculture, and using the Cherokee language to demonstrate etymologies and explanations and functions of nature in a way that brings that traditional ecological knowledge, like I said earlier, back to the circle of fire, which as human beings, that's us. That is the circle of fire. And so in collaborating with Allison and talking about these things, one of the other important things that we're working on right now is a curriculum for Indian herbalism and heritage food crops farming, which is what and Amy does, and has shared her teachings with anybody who, like me, who was willing to take a chance and get off the cell phone and get away from the TV and get into the garden. But when we're not in the garden, we're in the forest, and there's a lot of plants to identify for our foods. And once we establish relationships with those plants, then it's like somebody mentioned earlier, they were thinking the ancestral inhabitants in California. I can't remember which one of you said this, but in doing the research with the Forest Service, it had inspired me very strongly 4 or 5 years ago that we humans need to have relationships with these plants. And one of the things that we strive for here is having a relationship with these agencies who are in control of 1 million acres that belonged to, it didn't belong to, but that our ancestors lived upon, that they stewarded. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so a lot of these, and an example I heard in a pandemic conference we had with the Maori last year. Some of our Cherokee relatives out in Oklahoma talk about when the forced removal happened, how did it impact the plants that were here? And one of the plants was the chestnut tree. The American chestnut tree died from blight. And the Cherokee believed that it was a direct correlation to the forced removal. And so that's kind of like the aha moments, So anyway, one of the things that we would like to have connection and partnership with Allison is in our Indian herbalism program. We have a herbal apothecary and an herb clinic that's works to share basic tea infusions and blends and tinctures with the community that we made them as we could make them, and we just handed them out during the pandemic, during the early part of the pandemic, just to encourage people to keep their immune systems boosted. Because we have a story about the origin of disease in medicine. Mm-hmm. And so I'll let Amy mention that. And this is a very big part of like the things and the elements that we have to bring to the table. And I'll let her share that with you.
I see that in our gathering, the way I look at who we are as a people, we belong to this earth, and the seasons and the sun and the moon are all a part of that in our lives. Without those things, we couldn't be. And so after the winter months of not being able to have good things to eat, the first cycle is the ramps that come in, and that helps to clean out our lungs and our systems. and get us started on a cleansing path. And then the wild different greens that grow now for the next month or so, we can be out there gathering that. But I think as Tyson was talking, we Cherokees, there's very few of us that does not have diabetes. And I think that our woundedness creates the different diseases and terrible things that is manifested in our bodies in different ways. And so to get out in the woods, I have a bad knee, but when I was out there gathering ramps, I sat on the ground and I didn't even get up and walk around. I just scooted on the ground and gathered. And I had to use 2 sticks to get out there to walk that about a mile. We had to walk through the woods. But whenever I got ready to leave and come back to the car, my knee didn't bother me anymore. So to me, that is proof that the energy that we have is in everything that is. The energy force that creates all things and makes the movement of the earth and the waters in the ocean and all of that is all so tied together that there's no way we can get away from that and still sustain life. And so we all are going to have to change the way that we look at things. That stuff is not in boxes. It is intertwined and interlaced with everything else. That circle of life to me is like a ball. There's no end here and no beginning there. It all is so intertwined and needed for each other. And so this to me is our healing, so that those that come after us, what are they going to enjoy? Or will we even bother to leave them anything? Our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, and so on to the next 7 generations. This is what I have in mind. And this is my part in what I'm doing, is to help my grandchildren and and I've got some great-grandchildren already. And so this is why I do what I do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy. And just hearing Tyson and Amy talk, I'm realizing that these partnerships are not just, about sharing knowledge and resources, but really about sharing a different way of being and different way of kind of being in the land, being one with the land, and being with each other in community. If we could dig a little deeper, and maybe we could start with Dawn and Chris this time, because you all have been working together for about 2 years now. How has entering into this partnership with each other, and especially making this big commitment to restore the local economy at Pine Ridge Reservation, how has that changed the way that y'all are just doing business? Not just in a transactional sense, but in a kind of deeper value-based sense?
Yeah, I can start there. So for us as Native American Natural Foods, this has been a 2-year journey, and it was a partnerships move at the speed of trust. That's always been our saying. And was building that trust over the 2 years. It came in as technical and it ended up being more as we sat down and they looked at the core values of Native American Natural Foods, which our values are based in our indigenous values, prayer, respect for the lands there. So Nyman was exactly doing the exact same thing. And it's just in more, what I would say, colonized words. They were employee centric, right? They started each day a specific way. They're produced, they have their producers in the land and the regenerative practices that they're doing. It's just was said in a different way. So we saw these synergies within our missions and our values as the company. So we didn't really change as far as that goes with Tonka, because we have that story to the land and that connection and the authenticity of a recipe that we modernized. Nyman came on board as we've worked through these 2 years, not only technical, but it ended up turning into above that, as as a value-based and collaborative partnership. And we see this long-term after, even when he says they're going to get out of the way, they're adopted now, so they're not going anywhere. As we say in Indian country, they're family now. So and it's been 2 years, we're both trying to run our own businesses. Tonka came from, we have a lot of ground to make up to be the innovative leader again and take back our space in the industry. And they're along for that journey. So to find these partners that are willing to lock arms with you and walk hand in hand was really important. And it's really helped our company. One is to know somebody's done it with us and advise us through the bumps, even in the good part, too, and have that advisement. It's really helped us through technical, but also through the value and the growing our family, the Tonka family. And I'll let you go from there, Chris.
No, I think it's well said. And I kind of think of it on two levels. There's the business component, and then there's a personal component as well. And I'm going to start with the personal piece. We all have jobs that we do, and we kind of get caught up myopically in looking at the challenges that we face and the opportunities that we face. We take a lot of things for granted. And one of the things that I remember from the first meeting with Don and Mark was listening to their story, innovating and creating something, and then having a much better, larger, better funded company come in and just rip it away. Quite frankly, because it's hard to scale a business. And I remember going through those first couple of conversations and, I think probably for the first time in a while, having an appreciation for the benefits and the tailwind, that our company today is blessed with, and that I've been fortunate enough to have. And, it was really a call to action for us. I mean, the way this partnership worked at Nyman is, we actually held a vote with the entire staff to say, hey, I've got a great proposition for you. It's more work, no extra pay. You get to choose if you want to do it. And, the company and the people that are part of it, really believe in the mission. And they love, and it's a very much a shared mission, with Native American natural foods. And so it was a very natural fit. And I think that shared mission has been super important, and it benefits on a business level. And everyone who's participating has talked about the benefits in terms of perspective that they're experiencing on a personal level, and kind of, pulling their head up a little bit and realizing some of the advantages that we have today and in our own business. So it goes both directions, and they are family. We spend a lot of time together each week. So I'll leave it at that.
That's fascinating and really promising to hear about that deep kind of transformation that folks are having on a personal level as well. That's really cool. Angela and Penny, do you have, I know yours is a fairly new partnership. Do y'all have anything to add to that?
Well, I think Angela and I would both agree with what Chris says. There is the business side of the work that we're doing. And as we continue to talk, the ideas are starting to flow about how we can, we're jumping into possibly things that we never even imagined 6 months ago. But it is, for me personally, been a very rewarding relationship to get to know Angela and her partner, Harold, and go on this journey with them. It's just such a moment in time for understanding what has happened in Black farming. There's been a lot of talk about that recently in the press, and also with what's happened in Minneapolis this week. So it's really becoming, for me, a deeply personal relationship and mission to help support their efforts. And I'm really excited to see how we continue to walk this walk together.
Yeah, and I would just only add that there are some instances through our relationship, I think, and Penny sort of alluded to one of them, where, we do have this consideration of the business output needs, right? And the sort of interpersonal, non-hard topics, but very critical topics. And when you're talking about specifically Black farmers, and the Black community in general, when it comes in this context of hemp and cannabis, there are a lot of pain points to uncover, right? And so it's not super clean business-wise, I'll say. And that actually is one of the reasons why I chose the cooperative model for this effort, was because the cooperative model is a lot more circular in terms of problem solving, equity building, democracy building, those kinds of things. And it just allows more space for us to, make progress in areas that traditional businesses don't always count. And so, but just like a raw, real example of how this plays out in our relationship is that, we had to cancel a meeting yesterday because it was scheduled around the same time that the verdict was coming out. And in Minnesota, the temperature is a little hotter than it is in the rest of the country right now, especially yesterday afternoon. And, for me personally, before George Floyd, so I'll just be honest and say, I didn't know that I was going to have the reaction that I had during the jury's announcement. But, I had an experience at the beginning of my college career at the University of Minnesota, where I'm just going to acknowledge my friend, Alfred Sanders Jr., who was shot in the alley of by the Minneapolis Police Department, the same police that killed George Floyd, and 42 bullets in his body. And so it was the one and only time I was arrested was at the protest for Bo. And so it all just kind of came to a head for me yesterday when waiting for the verdict, because we never got that justice for Bo, right? So it was a real thing for me. And so I appreciate, Penny, I didn't get a chance to tell you, for you just kind of giving me that break to process that. And so a real thing, it happened. And I took some time with my staff. I made a big bowl of healing medicinal collard greens. I got through it. And so, but yeah, this is just kind of a real life example.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Angela. And it really is comforting to hear that, there's like a humanized, though y'all are businesses, there's a human element in the way that y'all are connecting with each other. It's really wonderful to hear. I want to go back to something that Dawn mentioned earlier, because this panel is about transformational relationships as story. And she mentioned that y'all are doing some of the same things, but y'all are using colonizers' words. And a lot of what we're trying to achieve with building these relationships is to change the narrative or change the story that's being told about a particular system, about a particular practice, and change the story in a way that it gives, pays respect and gives credit to the people that gives credit where credit is due. And when talking about systemic transformation, we also talk about the power of a good example and how one success story has the power to really shift things. So, and this question is open to all the panelists. What is the story that you want folks to take away from these partnerships? What is the shift that you want to see from the work that you are doing with each other?
Who did you want to
Go
start
ahead,
with?
Don.
Okay, I was going to say, who do you want to start with? What I hope to see out of this is more models. The one thing is we're addressing systemic change here, injustice within the food system, injustice with our land and what's been taken away. And it's bringing that knowledge back. So what we're looking for is more of these models. These larger brands are great examples like Nyman and Charlotte's Web and what everybody's doing is those brands are taking a step back and say, all right, how can we help these BIPOC businesses and these ranchers and these producers that are being suppressed, and the knowledge that's being suppressed when it's there. So I hope to see more models, because these brands have come in with open minds. They didn't say, this is the model you got to use the way I do it. How can we do it your way and bring our knowledge into it? And that's what we're looking for as, Indigenous companies, BIPOC companies, is we, allow us that space to do what we have to, because of those deep roots in that traditional storytelling we have. So that's what I hope to see, is more open mind. It's not always the cookie cutter model. We're addressing big change, and it takes a lot of people to do it. As we say, when we're raising our children, it takes a tribe, and it's the same thing here. It's going to take a tribe for all of us to do this together with an open mind. So that's what I hope to see out of more models like this coming forward, and collaborative partners, instead of how fast can you grow it and flip it. Go ahead. Is there anybody else? Angela?
I agree with Dawn. I was just going to say, wonderfully put, Dawn. We need more models, and this is the first time we're really kind of forging these kinds of partnerships, and we need to know, what's sustainable in these contexts, and we haven't really figured all of those things out yet. And so the more models that we can have, that kind of just goes with the same kind of work that I do here on the hemp farm, is that, like, I have all these hoop houses that I'm growing hemp in, but I have an experimental hoop house where I'm testing stuff out and trying to figure out what works in terms of different kinds of practices that we use with our crops. And so I kind of see our relationship with Charlotte's Web in a really similar way, in that we have a little test crop that we're working on, and we're kind of finding different areas of this crop that can that really highlight our strengths and can be used as models for other organizations and other partnerships.
Yeah, I would really echo what Dawn and Angela have said, of just, I'd love to see more companies having, stepping into the unknown a little bit with their community, and being open to try something new. And I think in business, a lot of times people think that it has to be perfect and it has to be ready before you to launch something. But if you find partners who are committed to this learning journey, it's really beautiful and inspiring, and can be so fun. Any business who operates in agriculture has a connection and responsibility to look into social justice issues and see the dynamics that have shaped where we are today as a food system. Our land and ag was built on genocide and the institution of slavery. And so as companies, it's, there's so many opportunities. I think it's just a matter of stepping into those communities and getting to know your communities, getting to know people that might not be your typical customer, but you are connected to in a web. And when you start those conversations, it's very clear quickly how closely you are connected. So I'd love to see that continue. And for me, especially with this relationship with Tyson and Amy and Missy, the element of spirit in work and what that can do to businesses and to people within that. I think, even a medicinal herb company like Gaia, we were founded on the theory that everything is connected, but you can lose that in commercialization of food and medicine. And so bringing that aspect of spirit back in has been really wonderful to have, with Tyson and Amy. So yeah, I'd add that.
Yeah, just kind of building on Allison's comment. I mean, business is often very clinical, right? It can be. And that's a huge risk for companies that allow it to become that. And Niman's not an old company. We're not a big company by any stretch. But when you spend time working with a company like Native American Natural Foods, that's really small. As I said before, you get a sense, you get perspective. That helps. But it also makes you have to think faster and think about doing more with less. And I think that exercise is really important, for, companies like ours to bring back into our organization, to make sure that we're still embracing change, to make sure we don't just, take for granted the advantages that we have and accept the status quo. And again, the struggle, that Native American natural foods, the journey that they're on, again, I think it provides perspective. And quite frankly, we're learning a lot, from Dawn and her team, about what it means to be resilient and nimble. And it's a great reminder and a lesson that we need to maintain.
So and I'd like to jump in. So Celine just asked an interesting question, which is how will the farmers in the 40-acre cooperative find benefits from the partnership with Charlotte's Web? And, our partnership is a little bit different. We are not in an explicit business model. We are providing access to resources and want to support the co-op. We are going to provide some hemp seed to the farmers in the co-op. And in addition to that, just giving back in ways that are more about knowledge and access, and providing, a very mission-based mindset around the social injustices that have happened in the hemp and cannabis industry. Right now in that space, as most people know, it's an industry where people of color have been put in jail and been discriminated against, and yet the industry is really right now being led by white men. And so our mission, we're very mission focused on trying to provide some justice to those communities and supporting them so they can enter that space and make money as well and join in. So our goal is to help right the wrongs of the past. And Angela has a great group of farmers that will allow us to at least start making those first steps.
Yeah, I'll just quickly follow up and say, so as a part of this, we are going to have sort of a pilot of 7 members of the cooperative that will be going through a mentorship sort of model with folks at Charlotte's Web. And so we're doing some relationship building around that right now to allow some of these members to meet with Penny and kind of ask their questions. And then we're going to, we're shaping a curriculum that meets their needs so that we can, really about removing the barriers. That's kind of really one of the main issues in the cannabis space right now, is that, it's wide open and prosperous if you're white and male, but it's pretty restrictive and complicated if you're not. And so we're trying to kind of broaden the space, kind of starting out with this first year, is just really, creating the space to kind of find out where these barriers are, where we can eliminate some of the barriers or make some of the, just getting into hemp farming in general is pretty tough. And so where can we create soft landing spaces here for our members to get into the industry and to, I guess, from being on the bottom of the industry to getting a more sustainable place in hemp and cannabis.
Thank you all. And maybe this is a good place to transition to Q&A. Let me pull up. We have some great questions from the audience, actually. We have a question from Lisa. Lisa says, thanks for sharing, Tyson and family. I'm part Cherokee too, from North Carolina, and I'm so interested to learn more about Cherokee traditional cuisine. How can this community help Americans learn more about Native American food traditions? And this would be for Tyson and family.
I think that there was some kind of a research done that most people who were born in the South, there's some high percentage, 85%, have indigenous blood, whether you're Black or white identified. And so what happened is a lot of the indigenous blood got mixed in with all the other races. And so I always encourage people, if you identify as being Cherokee, learn the history. And in this case, the history is about ecological knowledge and awareness and relationship. And part of the initiatives that we have outlined here is an Indian herbalism program, a wild foods initiative, including a cafe, and working with an Amy in the garden and helping her to get her crop going and keeping that 4 acres weeded. And because she does have a tractor, but she doesn't have like all this other farm equipment that you see on big commercial farms. It really is more of the traditional way. And so much of our staples rely on those heritage corn and beans that she raises. And so one way then, once we get up and running with our other people who are working diligently to get an online course going, then you can sign up for the online course. And the name of all of these projects that also include writing a book, a cookbook, and also an ethnobotanical reference using our language, because we have a written language. And so I encourage people to learn the Cherokee language as much as possible, because that's one of the places where we got hit the hardest. We have less than 200 fluent speakers here within our 10 communities. And, you know, if colonization would have allowed us to continue to speak our language, I don't think we'd be in this climate crisis, because the Cherokee language is a language that is based upon functions of nature, right? Very descriptive. Auntie said very descriptive. And it helps us to understand our relationship to how plants grow, how we identify them. For an example, when you talk about plants, when you refer to them plural, you say suyega. It comes from the root word yegi, which means they're awake. So once you start to look at the world around us through these lenses, you can understand that plants aren't just some forest product or some garden product. They are a whole other intrinsic, interwoven, living system that has everything to do with our being and our identification and our survival.
And it's like the eggs that was in our. I like to look at it as my daughter passed away last July, the last day of July, from cancer. But she painted 3 paintings, and they were all done in the year 2020. The last one she painted was a large turtle in the water swimming, and it had a body of another turtle inside her, but inside the one that was inside of her is the eggs for her grandchildren to be born. And so that description to me about being awake before we were ever, the egg was fertilized that made us, we were here in our grandmother's stomach, in her womb. And so this, to me, the language describes those kinds of things about many things that we talk about in our language here. And I'd like to assume that other native languages around the world maybe has done that too at one time, because the English language to me puts things in boxes. It doesn't refer to the relationships. And so this is how I look at all things in my life. but I only learned that in my later years. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. That's really beautiful. And in relation to that, we have a question from Josanne about how one could learn the Cherokee language if there's spaces where that's offered.
The tribe here has a division called the Kadua Preservation and Education Program. And out of that, they've produced several videos. You can watch them on YouTube. But beyond that, it's just, I think people my age and younger are aware of the fact that if we don't implement more of our language in our daily lives, then it will continue to fade away more. And one of my own personal perceptions is, I know our people were heavily proselytized and assimilated and acculturated, and they were through the boarding schools, but there are also entire acts of Congress that force our tribes to pattern themselves after the American government. And so we kind of, we colonize ourselves at this point. And so in order to shake free from those shackles, we have an opportunity here to use the Cherokee language, and it has to be approved through a process here within the tribe. And, I think aside from just like gathering or procuring whatever material you can from the internet, the other thing is to, you can take classes through Western Carolina University, University of North Carolina at Asheville, Stanford University. I'm sure that the two federally recognized Cherokee tribes in Oklahoma have a lot of programs that they have through Northeastern University and the University of Oklahoma. So there's a lot of other means. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Tyson. And yeah, we encourage everyone to look up where you can find resources and learn more. Someone else, Ruth, also shared recommended Braiding Sweetgrass, which is about indigenous wisdom in plants. And with that, we've come to a close. We're already over time. Thank you to all of you for sharing, for first undertaking these partnerships, for making the leap and doing something that hasn't been tried before. I like the idea of the experimental crop that Angela was talking about. And I hope that from this panel, from listening to folks, everyone is inspired to sow their own experimental crop. And hopefully that leads to change, leads to real change in relationships and perspectives, and eventually systemic transformation. Thank you all, and thank you for listening, everybody else.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
To Zinab and all the panelists, was the most beautiful conversation. I wish we could just take a few minutes in silence to let all of the incredible things you all said just sink in. But unfortunately, we don't have time. So I'm going to now switch gears to say that we all know that talking to consumers about regenerative agriculture and products is really challenging. Trying to do it in 90 seconds or less, as we've heard throughout the last 2 days, even more so. So in this Regenerative Slam, we're going to take a look and see how Applegate, Vital Farms, and Teton Waters Ranch do exactly that. The 90-second story.
As a chef, I do feel like it's important to utilize animals that have been pasture raised. That just the flavor is so much richer. You're just getting a better product, you know? The marbling on the pork is beautiful. The final product is just, the flavor is so intense.
Regenerative agriculture is a much more holistic approach to farming, where you think about not just low-cost production models, but you think about what the impact is to soil health, animal health, people health, community health, all these dots that need to be connected to build a more healthy food system.
As a farmer, you're in more control about the product. You're going to look for that quality of hog that produces the best quality meat. I mean, we grow it right here on the farm, fresh.
You know, just all across the board, animals that are pasture raised have proven to be a lot better and yield a much better product.
We're not going to give you anything to eat that we're not going to eat ourselves. I'm going to eat good. So I'm going to want you to eat good.
Vital Farms is passionate about our honest practices, so I brought in the high school halftime show to help tell you about them.
We have butter, yes we do, from cows on pastures where the sky is blue.
Vital Farms butter comes from cows with outdoor access all year round.
Go Reds, be concrete.
Some other butters come from cows kept indoors 365 days a year.
Do what's right, even if it's hard. Cows are raised in our own backyard. American Family Farm.
Woo! That's the Vital Farms spirit. Vital Farms, where honest food is raised. Vital Farms has some honest to goodness news to share, so I've asked the Action 4 team to come help us out.
Thank you, Sean. Vital Farms ethically sourced egg bites are here, and sources say they're, quote, protein-packed and ready in 45 seconds. The pasture-raised eggs come from hens like Patricia, who roam around on pastures free from pesticides and herbicides. These bites are made with humanely raised meats and cheeses from pasture-raised cows.
I love a juicy news story.
What?
Vital Farms, where honest food is raised. Vital Farms is an open book, so I got Miss Fisher, the local librarian, to help share some of our story.
Many egg companies want you to think their hens are roaming free and happy. But really, a lot of those cage-free hens are trapped inside, like recess got canceled forever. That's why Vital Farms works with family-run farms in the pasture belt, so hens can do hen things outside all year long. The end.
Read it again. Vital Farms, where honest food is raised.
Our mission at Teton Waters Ranch is to create a regenerative, humane, healthy food system for all by staying committed to being better for three things: the planet, the animals, and you. Now, there's a lot of confusion surrounding the impact of beef on the environment, animal welfare, and your health. And with so many misleading terms and claims from companies talking about how they raise and feed their cattle, how are you supposed to differentiate between them all and make the best choice for you and your family? Good news. Teton Waters Ranch is here to lead you to greener pastures. Did you know that around 70% of the world's grasslands have been wrecked due to human and environmental factors such as urban sprawl, poor land management, and the growing effects of climate change? But we've seen firsthand on our own ranch how planting native grasses, rotating cattle, and letting them fertilize where they eat rehabilitates the land, sequesters carbon, and creates a food system that is both regenerative and healthy. Let's see how grass-fed beef benefits the environment. A ranch that has 130 cattle and tractor equipment with processing and distribution produces 112 tons of carbon. On the other hand, a grass-fed ranch that has 150 acres of pasture actually sequesters 500 tons of carbon. That's 388 tons of carbon removed from the atmosphere annually. And that's just one small ranch. Join us in creating a better future with 100% grass-fed and grass-finished beef. A better future from the grass up, literally.
That was really fun. And I just want to give another gratitude to our previous panel. So we are, I feel very excited also about this conversation, telling the good farm animal story. This panel is a culmination of the sense of the importance of getting the story right about animals and their foundational role in healing our land. As Tracy Medema shared yesterday, it's really important to look at the intelligence in nature, and life on Earth evolved very symbiotically with a connection between land health and animals who live on it. We have 3 amazing leaders from companies that are literally setting the tone for how to work in harmony with farm animals to give them best lives, and a 4th who's really helping create that clarity about what is humane for the lives of animals on the landscape. We're grateful to have Lisa Mabe, the founder and CEO of Green Purse PR, and also marketing communications for the Savory Institute's Land to Market program, moderating this conversation. So I really am excited to welcome Vital Farms, Applegate, Teton Waters Ranch, and GAP, the Global Animal Partnership, to this conversation, and welcome to the stage.
Thank you. All right, happy Earth Week. It's a whole week now. In fact, it's really a whole month as well to celebrate Earth Week, Earth Day. It's every day anyway. We're going to focus on some of the good news stories regarding how some farms, companies, and organizations are improving the lives of farm animals, and telling those stories like you just saw in the videos in the marketplace. And certainly the folks we have on our panel represent companies and organizations who are helping lead the charge on doing better by the planet, doing better by people and farm animals alike. So let's jump right in so we can cover up as much territory as possible. Firstly, I'd like to offer up this question, and hopefully we can answer it maybe in 3 to 4 minutes for each person, just to give a nice overview of your company or organization. But I'd like you all to briefly share a bit about how your company or organization is helping farm animals live their best life, so to speak. And Anne, if you want to take that one first.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. As Lisa and Delvin introduced me, I'm the Executive Director of Global Animal Partnership. For those of you that don't know about GAP, as we're commonly known, we are a multi-tier program. And what's unique about that is it means it's not a one-size-fits-all program. And we're really about continuous improvement. So people can come into the program at whatever level, as long as they meet a base set of requirements, are all of the standards that we have, and then it provides them a roadmap for change. And we began in 2008. We were spun out of Whole Foods Market. We're now an independent organization and have been since 2008. We have standards for beef, pork, chicken, turkey, lamb, bison, laying hens, and soon to be dairy and farm salmon. We are third-party certified, and we're a little unique as well in that we just do standards and we accredit third-party certifiers to do the standard for us and administer that. In terms of scope, we certify around 416 million animals annually across 11 different countries. And we have worked really, really hard with not only our farm partners, but in trying to get as many businesses on board that can help with carcass utilization so that those farmers can be really successful. Thanks, Lisa.
That's a lot of farm animals. That's amazing. Russell, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thanks, Lisa. So Vital Farms was founded in 2007. And our founder, Matt O'Hare, believed that there could be a better life for farm animals. And he saw the biggest opportunity was with laying hens, which at the time found themselves 95% of the time living in cramped cages. And so our impact on helping animals live their best life started with the choice to only produce eggs from chickens that are pasture raised with meaningful and verifiable outdoor access. And so the next thing he did was he worked with the predecessor organization to Certified Humane to develop the U.S. standard for pasture raising, because as we've seen and as the Teton Waters video so well called out, there's an awful lot of confusion and misleading terms and greenwashing out there. And so Matt felt it was important to bring a partner along who could vouch for the veracity of what we were doing. Today, what it looks like is we work with over 200 small family farms. we've made a very purposeful decision to only work with farms in the part of the Southeast United States that we call the pasture belt, because we don't think you can do meaningful outdoor access year-round, at least for laying hens, in different climates, in cold climates in the Northeast, for example, in places in the Southwest that are too arid, et cetera. And so we're not local to all of our major markets, but we're true to our brand and to the commitment that we've made to animal welfare. We work an awful lot with those small family farmers, with our own people, boots on the ground, helping to train, helping to inspire and engage, because what we don't want to be is a compliance organization. We want our interactions with farmers to be positive and fruitful in the spirit of co-creation. And so when we vet and find farmers whose values align with ours and who truly understand that their success will come from the success of the whole system, then the conversation gets elevated well beyond us running checklists all the time, although we do a few of those as well.
Nice, thank you. Mike, you want to go next?
Absolutely. Delighted to be on this panel with you all. Good to see some that I know from past lives. Yes, happy Earth Week to everybody. I'm also glad that as a brand, I'm not the only one who's shamelessly embracing that with my background. Thank you, gentlemen, for the comfort in numbers there. But, really, that's the answer to your question, Lisa. Teton Waters Ranch is a company, much like the others on the panel, that was born, with a why statement and has a mission that's still about that. For us, it was our founder, wasn't planning to get into beef. He really inherited some dead land that had been monocropped for generations, for potatoes. And he did have an environmental bug in him. And he heard from some friends that if he did certain things, he could turn that dead, desertified piece of land in the shadow of the Tetons on the Idaho side into something vibrant. And he experimented. And ultimately, the tip that was the inflection point was introduce grazing ruminants. He did that, and overnight, by environmental standards, the land transformed, and almost out of happenstance and a secondary byproduct, this, really the world's best grass-fed and finished beef, was born. So we're still a company focused on regenerative agriculture first and foremost. And what we're trying to do as a brand is make basically environmental activism easy for consumers, which, talk about all the auspicious challenges we're embarked upon as a community. That sounds pretty ambitious, but it's a chipping away at the exercise. And the thing that helps the animals is the fact that grass-fed beef, truly grass-fed and fully grass-finished beef, raised as humanely as possible, is what we're passionate about and focused on as the tool to do that. So we create solutions for consumers around that, and that makes them aware. It gets them to consider solutions that use it. They try it, they repeat, they get loyal to it, and ultimately they will advocate. And again, it's not just for the products we make, it's for what they stand for and what they do for the environment and for the animals. And we really see animal welfare and the environment and fixing our planet as completely commingled and intrinsic to one another. Partnering with our supply chain to make sure that none of that confusion about all beef animals eat some grass at some point during their lives, so everybody's grass-fed. No, that's not what consumers expect. They have to eat it throughout their life, no different finishing stages. You cannot confine them as part of that process. It does not do what's so great about it for the land and the animals. And it's the foil we're fighting against is the antithesis to the humane treatment of animals. In beef, it's really terrible. They're force-fed food that we grow at a great expense to our environment, that they're not designed to digest as ruminants. Surprise, surprise, that makes them sick. Then we confine them, and we know about the ill effects of the conventional beef industry. So just educating consumers and creating demand at a premium that facilitates all of that from a supply chain standpoint is really how we see our role not just in the environment, but in animal welfare, which are, again, almost one and the same to us.
Perspective. And oh, good. There's John. I was just getting ready to say we lost you for a second.
Hi, Lisa. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, coming through fine. Mike just finished up. So if you want to just take a stab at briefly sharing a little bit about how your company is helping farm animals live their best lives.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So I think helping farm animals live their best lives or animal welfare is at the heart of the Applegate story for a long time now. We've been around for over 30 years, and our mission, stated mission all along, has been changing the meat we eat. It does start back at the farm. We've worked with a lot of partners over the years, including Ann and the Global Animal Partnership, to really help advance the system. And I think while the topic has been the same, some of the underlying issues that have come to the surface around animal agriculture have changed over time. So, for example, a number of years back, antibiotics in animal agriculture was a big topic for Applegate. It's a big topic, by the way. It's maybe not the topic of the day right now in the narrative that's out there, but it's still a big topic. So when we started at Applegate, raising animals, working with farmers to raise animals without antibiotics, we were working with a handful of farms, and there was virtually no market that existed for that kind of meat. Today, it's over a $3 billion market for meat raised without antibiotics. And storytelling has been a very big part of that, of bringing the consumer along the journey. Being able to communicate the differences of how the animals are raised, animals for animal welfare, also animals as a part of a system, right? And I think that's what's so important. So if I think about, where we sit today, with some of the challenges that are coming our way from a climate change standpoint, the health impacts of meat consumption, the environmental impacts of meat consumption, we need to think about the whole system. And obviously animals continue to be a really important part of that, but they're a part of a holistic story that we need to tell. So I think from the perspective of Applegate, we sit here and you might not be able to see it behind me. I'll twist my head for a second. It says meet the future. Our focus is how do we really keep driving this thing forward and not sitting and looking back. And driving it forward means uncovering new pathways and really pushing forward on regenerative agriculture in beef, but in other species as well. So the last, comment I'll make about Applegate, and I think one of the things we can help with and talk about is we do have a business that spans across species. So we have a beef business, we have a chicken business, we have a pork business, and we have a turkey business. Those businesses all start on the farm. They start with animals. They start with farmers. And so I think one of the things we do looking across species is really figuring out what is that total footprint of the industry and how can we help and work with great partners like the folks we have here on the panel today.
Very good. That was perfect, everyone. So I'll see how many questions we can get through. I have a few that are specific for each one of you, but then some that can apply to everyone, just depending on who has something they want to share. But this is one I definitely want to cover off on, is business being a force for good, as was mentioned earlier in the summit today. And I know that force for good message, and we can perhaps all talk about it as well, but I understand in particular, Vital Farms is really trying to champion the conscious capitalism movement, which we're all probably fairly familiar with, but yet it's not really a path that's widely practiced in corporate America. And Russell, I'd love to know, how that unique business model and your mission to bring ethical food to the table, how does conscious capitalism play into helping you fulfill that mission?
Thanks for that. And let me start by making an admission, which is that while I grew up in Santa Cruz, California, I did not come to Vital Farms reflecting the values of conscious capitalism. I went to a fancy business school in the late 90s, and we had the debate about the role of the corporation. And I was firmly in the Friedman camp, which is management maximizes profits, and if the shareholders want to give it away as charity, that's up to them. That's not management's job. I had a decidedly American point of view on what capitalism meant and how it ought to work. It wasn't until I got to Vital Farms that I saw sort of a different way of thinking about capitalism. Vital Farms was founded with conscious capitalism as the core of its culture. Matt O'Hare, our founder, had had started many companies over his lifetime. He's a serial entrepreneur in the truest sense. And he was looking for a different approach. And he became very taken with the notion that business deserves a higher purpose than just to profit maximize. And what I saw when I got here was that, and I came along in 2014, was that for the first time in my life, a company culture and a company's values were embedded in the daily activity. They weren't just written up on a wall to be dusted off once a week. When, you know, and I was the business guy that came in and to the small, fast-growing company and asked tough questions about, you know, where we were making money and where we weren't, and who was performing well and who wasn't. And all of those conversations started immediately with, well, what's the impact on our stakeholders? Let's talk about what it might mean for our customers, our employees, for the small family farmers we're working with. And what I came to realize is that to talk about conscious capitalism or, you know, business with purpose as some sense of a trade-off, it's purpose or profits or purpose before profits, I find to be very much a misnomer. Because what I've seen is that when you take your stakeholders as true co-creators and you problem solve with them on the same side of the table, I believe you grow the pie. I believe you get to better outcomes. And so I don't think it's a trade-off. I actually think it's a more productive way to do business. It's, you know, I can take the mission-driven part of it and say, well, yeah, we attract and retain better people who are more highly engaged because they believe in that. And that might be a design choice for recruiting, but it goes far beyond that. It's everything from the way we collaborate with our farmers so that they each help each other get to better outcomes, to the transparency that we take with our retail partners so that when we're shorting orders during COVID, they appreciate the communication and don't penalize us for it. You know, that it is, I hang on to that as our right to exist, frankly. And when we make investments in things related to regenerative agriculture, when we make investments in things related to DEI, those are all driven by the needs of our stakeholders and their long-term sustainability.
Anyone else want to chime in on business as a force for good? Otherwise, I have lots more things to get to. All right, let me move on then.
Yeah, Lisa, if I could just add one comment, which is I think that Russell is spot on with all of his comments. And I think the good news is there's a growing consumer base who put a value on it, which means, you know, leaning in that direction, the gravity is going the right way. That's all I would add. From a consumer point of view, that's the good news for us, I think.
All right, this next question is for Anne. And then again, I can let others weigh in if they'd like. But what role can third-party certifications and verifications play in telling the good farm animal story, and specifically telling it to consumers and shoppers?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Lisa. I'm not sure how many of you listened to Brian's panel or talk earlier today, but I think he really nailed it on the head with authenticity and transparency. And I really think third parties can play a real vital role in that. You know, it's one thing I can say for the NGO community. A lot of times we don't have a lot of resources. And so we really work with our partners to try and tell that story. And I think with other stories out there that are maybe a little bit more well-funded, it's hard for sometimes consumers to pick apart what's real and authentic and what isn't. And I think third parties can play a real vital role in that, especially third-party programs. So I think they have a huge important role. And also I think from the, you know, putting on my business hat, I think for businesses, third parties also offer some risk assessment for them, because it's a third party going in and looking at what their supply chain is doing and being able to have that little bit of extra confidence, or give that little extra bit of confidence for a consumer. I don't know what my fellow panelists think of that, but that's how we sort of try and strategize and position ourselves with our business partners.
Do any of the brands, do you see, much value from kind of touting some of those third-party certifications, whether it's for farm animal welfare specifically, or really any of the certifications and labels that talk about having a better environmental impact, or, fair trade, all the different third-party labels, really?
I would just say, I think that these topics get very complicated when you work in the industry. And so for consumers, they're even more complicated, right? They don't spend as much time understanding standards and systems and verifications. However, I do think that certifications are important because we need to continue to have objectivity. And I think to the extent that they represent objectivity, and I think, Ann's point is spot on. It's a very important part of the experience for consumers. That being said, I still think they get confused. So we need to go beyond. I think they play a role, but I think there's a bigger storytelling that needs to happen so they can internalize to the extent that they want to understand. But I think the certification piece is very important.
Yeah, I'd agree. And just to add that, unique to beef, something we deal with is that when you take our internal standards for true grass-fed and finished, and then you overlay a third-party standard for animal welfare, like GAP or Certified Humane, which is one we partner with as well. You actually have for beef, that's a stronger feature set of what the modern consumer especially demands than USDA organic. And that's, the consumer has over, decades come to understand USDA organic as something very good. They're still not clear on exactly why, largely, but very good and as good as it gets in a lot of categories, and it is. But that's the complication, even with certifications, is they do mean different things situationally. And actually, unfortunately, beef can be certified organic, and the animal can be force-fed grains, and the animal can be not treated as humanely as it could be on its most unpleasant days. So, it's just important to commit and focus on that communication and keep chipping away at it.
I think one other thing to add there is one of the things that we try to do too is really live that continuous improvement. So I think third-party programs are, we have to add value to our partners and to the farms that we work with as well. And I think that spirit of continuous improvement, we may have limited resources at times, but I think we can move just as quickly on that, sort of pushing the needle forward and really helping to drive that change.
I love that thought, Anne, about continuous improvement for anything, not only farm animal welfare, but anything related to having a positive impact on planet, people, animals, just realizing that not everyone is perfect yet. We're all taking baby steps to get there, and that it's very difficult to make dramatic changes to various production systems or farming systems overnight. And consumers may not necessarily realize that. In fact, they definitely don't realize that. But that's why I think it's so important for us to celebrate everyone's wins along the way, even if they're seemingly quite small, which is part of what we're doing here today, kind of cheerleading on some of the brands and organizations that are trying to do it right. And I'm seeing some questions coming in that I think we can go ahead and start integrating into our conversation. One here that I'm seeing, I believe this is from Trudy. Can you give some perspective on what percentage of meat consumed today is raised using your humane/regenerative methods, and how has this changed? Anyone want
I can just weigh in on beef specifically, and then others are probably more qualified on broader animal protein. But yeah, I typed in the response, and it's difficult to think about because there's been a lot faster growth in grass-fed finished beef than the broader conventional beef industry for several years now. However, and I don't know if this is technically true for the humane piece of it as well, but grass-fed and finished claims meat is still around a 1% share of the over $100 billion conventional beef industry in the US. So, making progress, but the pie is very small, and as a sort of a challenger movement driven by challenger brands within an industry, that's why it's really important to, especially for brands that are mission driven and like-minded, cooperate more than compete, because there is a large foil there that is going to be difficult to change. But we can do it. But it's less than a 1 share for beef through one lens.
For shell eggs at retail, in the natural and organic channel, places like Whole Foods and Sprouts, if you take pasture-raised eggs and free-range eggs, which is a tortured term, but let's call all the eggs that make some claim to outdoor access, it's over 50%, about 55% of the units of eggs sold in natural and organic claim outdoor access. And in conventional grocery, it's 6%. Interestingly, in the United Kingdom, last year, it was over 55% across the country in all channels. So we see a future when, there's a lot more awareness of food systems and a lot more willingness to vote with money for something better there. But we're hopeful that that's just a portent.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers, but it's very, very, very small in the certification animal welfare piece. And it's one of the reasons actually that GAP has actually been looking to see if we can work with other organizations. And, a lot of us are single sort of attribute programs. And the more I think we can work together, instead of, like Michael said, instead of competing with one another and working together, I think we can have a much bigger footprint and really start to drive things forward. So we've been trying to look for those types of opportunities to work with others.
Thanks for knowing what I meant by cooperate, which is maiming whatever it's supposed to be.
All right, another question that I think we can go ahead and weave in is, are brands talking about regenerative farming, or for our topic, regenerative farming, plus also just better farm animal welfare as well? How is that message landing with consumers or shoppers? And I also want to filter into that conversation with regards to, talking directly with consumers and shoppers. If any of you have had the opportunity to connect with consumers on a level, and I'm sure some of you have, of either getting them out to the farm level, which I know is harder to do during pandemic days, but aside from that, getting them out to the farm and letting them see firsthand, because you got to keep in mind, as you know, a lot of consumers are not farmers, producers, ranchers. They don't have the knowledge and expertise to, in many cases, have a good understanding of, they can't really appreciate all these extra things that farmers and producers are doing. And if it's not directly at the farm, because that's not possible for everyone, although we'd love that, even, a virtual sort of experience where you can share your story directly with them and better communicate the message of regenerative farming or better farm animal welfare, or really anything that applies to doing better by the planet, people, and animals.
Lisa, I could jump in for a moment and then let the others go from there. I would say, a couple of comments. One, there are divides, right? There was a question in the chat about economic divide. There's also a big urban-rural divide in our country. And I think your point is spot on, that many of our consumers on these businesses tend to be on the coasts, and a lot of the farming is happening in the middle of the country. And so it's almost like the distance from farming is getting greater, yet the consumers want change, but they really don't understand a lot of it. Now, of course, the next thing I'll just talk about is layers. We do have very educated consumers who understand a lot and want to go deep. And then we have other consumers who are really more focused on their kitchen table and kind of what they're putting down every day and what are the benefits to them. And you have everything else. So I guess the principle I would say from a storytelling standpoint is we do need to tell stories that, have the farm side of it, to bring those who are interested and want to learn and really showcase the holistic story, which has a social piece, an economic piece, an animal piece, an environmental piece. But we also need to be able to boil that down in a very simple consumer language. So one example that is in our Applegate lore, that is always inspiration for us, is antibiotics in animal agriculture was a big complicated issue as to why the overuse of antibiotics was causing environmental and risk to human health. Our founder knew that, and he'd go and he'd talk about that in the right forums. But when he boiled it down to a consumer message, what he used to say is, would you sprinkle antibiotics on your kid's cereal every day? It just doesn't make sense, right? And that's how we're treating our animals. So you do need to be able to span from one end to the other, and that's really where our consumers are.
I think what John said is spot on. The challenge we've got is that we make 100 choices every day that we believe are right for the whole system, including animal welfare and the environment. And we nerd out on all the stats, right? Michael had in his video, Mike talked about carbon sequestration and the amount of carbon that's produced on a farm. But it's a small fraction of our consumers that really want to know the carbon footprint of the eggs. Mostly they just want to know that these eggs did better than the other ones. And you know, we were doing consumer ethnography work. So understanding how consumers use and interact with products and how they engage with the products. And the way it works is you go to a grocery store and you paid this shopper to let you kind of trail them around the store and ask them questions. And the facilitator, every time this woman would pick up a product and put it in her cart, she would ask her questions. Why did you choose that particular product? And what does organic mean to you? Or tell me what non-GMO means to you? Or what did you think about this one as opposed to this one over there? And after maybe the fourth or fifth product, you know, the woman kind of threw up her hands in exasperation and said, look, it seems like every couple of days I read or hear about another brand or product that made a claim and then kind of broke their promise. Whether it was organic grain being shipped in from Europe that started out as conventional and arrived as organic magically, or whether it was, you know, organic laying hens that don't ever get to go outside. She said, at the end of the day, I need to trust you as a brand, and then it doesn't matter as much what you tell me you're doing. I just know you're doing the right thing. And that's the challenge we've got. We want to tell everybody all the great things, and they just want to hear just a little bit of it. And so we have to be very thoughtful about what we choose to talk about.
Yeah, I'll just add quickly. Great points, and you know, there's no replacement for having a deep conversation with a consumer out in the grass, right, on a fantastic ranch, and being able to contrast what they see there and how the animals are behaving, and how the land looks to the conventional alternatives. But that is challenging, and you can't do it all the time. You can't do it at scale. Digital community building is the sort of modern marketing proxy for that. And something we like to do at Teton is we're very passionate about our social media community and building digital community, you know, really the engagement within it. We bucket our content with intention under those 3 pillars referenced in the video. There's content that's really about, you know, saving the planet and our regenerative agriculture origins. There's content about how what we do is better for the animals. And there's content that's really more about what's better for you and what's in it for me. And traditionally, and I've seen this in other situations I've worked on as well, you know, the content that's most close to the consumer's everyday problems and solutions as it relates to food usually do by far the best, even with a focused, curated digital community as it relates to engagement metrics. And you know, these are daily data-driven feedback cycles that you can get with a modern marketing mix. You know, and at first we were still seeing that a few years ago with our content mix at Teton. Then we started really working, but you know, we stayed committed. So one lesson is, as a brand who has a mission in this space, you got to be willing to make what seemed like bad data-driven decisions to stay committed to the movement, right? So we would still do plenty of planet and animal content, obviously, and they would just do a lot worse in terms of the social media KPIs. And we would have to continue to tell the agency, that's okay. We're not going to ding you for it. We are committed to this. It's our mission. That's what it's about. But we did keep working on the how behind the creative and the messaging of those more complicated and more removed from the consumer's everyday topics. And you know, as we got to the more bite-sized and pithy they were, the better the KPIs were as they came back. And you hate to oversimplify really important topics, but it is crucial. And when you get the right motivational quote or meme or, daily life hack tip to make environmental activism easy for the consumer, when we get there, we would start to see those engagement KPIs compete and sometimes surpass just basically the food porn and recipe content that usually drives those bigger numbers in food. So that's a feedback loop that can be really valuable.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I know firsthand from managing social comms for brands myself, like it's so irritating for the social media moderator if you've put a lot of time into developing content that's really meaningful and maybe goes a little bit deep into some of the good things that the company's doing, but then hardly anyone wants to look at that. They just want to look at the recipe post. But I do know at least the folks who respond to those sorts of messages, those are most likely to be the ones who are uber passionate about it. So it's not completely in vain. It's just finding a healthy mix of what works for the variation in your audience. One thing I just wanted to share real quick is this. I don't know if you can see it because my background is, I'm disappearing. This is something super cute that I just got from Vital Farms. And in terms of like communicating to consumers and parents, especially for Earth Week. And I thought this was really fun. I love it when brands do, the little free activities that you can download and print during all of our time at home. And it corresponds to the Vital Times, which is inside their egg cartons. And even though you're not going physically to a farm, as we mentioned a few minutes ago, it allows you to go onto their website and like learn the name of a laying hen and see some of the farms. And it's something that I printed out for my own young children to do at some point for Earth Week. And I love little examples like that. I think are really meaningful, especially to consumers who are health conscious parents.
Thank you.
All right, so let me pop over to one of our growing list of questions here. So this is from Josanne. Apart from the ecological, regenerative, or sustainable aspect, how are meat farmers affected by the vegetarian/vegan movement, especially in cities? And how popular do you think this really is in the mindset of folks across the United States?
It's a great question. I could jump in if you want to start it off, go from there. So I think that we're seeing, the vegetarian, or let's call it meatless movement gaining steam. I think there's a lot of people who are eating plant-based or incorporating more plant-based and meatless alternatives in their diets. The growth rates are high. That being said, the meat industry still grew last year, and it's massive, right? So it's not even really close from that standpoint, but there is a lot of growth happening for good reasons. I think the challenge that I look at it from a higher standard and welfare, better farm story company is how do we make sure that the plant-based movement, which has its right to exist and a great story to tell, doesn't undermine the progress that we're making on the meat side. Some of the narrative from the plant-based really puts all meat in one bucket, kind of, lumps it as all meat is bad for the planet, bad for your health, bad for the animals. And I think our ability, to your earlier point, to make progress, right? We need to keep making progress. We're not perfect. The meat industry has a long way to go. Even our brands have progress to make. We know that, but we need to keep making progress. And we need to make sure our brands remain healthy, continue to tell those stories, and continue to invest in innovation, continue to invest in scaling regenerative agriculture. There's a lot to learn and a lot to do there. So from my point of view, what I want to make sure of is that we have a competing narrative coming from animal-based agriculture to tell a very important story that animals and plants live together in the system. They have for a long time. They need to continue to thrive together in the future so we can have, a very healthy agriculture system, healthier foods made from real meat, real plants together. And I think that's the narrative we need to embrace and make sure we're telling it aggressively, because the movement right now, I think, is less about the dollars, but more about the story and our ability to make progress on the animal side.
Yeah, does anyone else want to weigh in? Because that, is a nice segue into, certainly we've all seen a lot of news coverage that tries to demonize meat and lump it all into one category as if it's the same thing, conventional versus, pasture-based systems, for example. Any thoughts or, ideas around how we can collectively as a community flip the narrative against all meat, or perhaps even more general animal products, and flip the story that, they're saying it's all bad for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in, and I don't know how incremental my point is to John's. I agree with everything you said, because one of the most discouraging things I've seen recently was, and it was ridiculous. It was infighting between plant-based players, and it's like, what are you guys doing? Yeah, neither of you are perfect, but you're missing it here. And meanwhile, when you're done fighting with each other, you throw brands like Teton and Vital and Applegate under the bus, with the collective of massive conventional, agriculture. And, you're doing everybody a disservice in doing that. So it's just really important, like John said, to understand who the foil really is, and embrace anything that represents progress. And again, I've spent a large part of my career working on plant-based solutions and vegan products. And, a lot of people didn't understand how I could go from that to working at a meat company. And by the way, John's done that himself. But when you think it through, it's like, guys, it's all better. And this is just about making the food system better. And they all have a role for different reasons for modern consumers. This grass-fed beef thing, might be a way to actually drive more change more quickly than some of the plant-based dairy alternative stuff I was working on. And it was, just as, if not more motivating from a mission and change agenda standpoint in that regard. So yeah, understanding the foil, keeping your eye on the mission, and partnering, and like I said earlier, even though I said it wrong, cooperating, whatever the phrase is, with people that are, the zero-sum game competition thing can't be part of what we do if we're driving modern food brands that are helping the food system get better.
I think, and I get the question a lot actually from the investment community, because they see the growth rates for plant-based alternatives. And I often get the question, well, will Vital Farms be rolling out a plant-based line of products? And, the truthful answer, I think, is that arguably they and we are trying to solve many of the same ills of factory farming and corporate agriculture. I think when the history books are written, they will likely find that there was a lot more damage done from plant-based alternative production, both as a food and as an agricultural product, than is widely perceived today. And the facts will speak for themselves, right? Mike will tell a carbon sequestration story with facts and data, and at some point, somebody who, maybe in an NGO, or maybe in a UN climate organization, might say, you know what, there's a difference. Maybe some cows are okay. Maybe they can support our climate goals. And maybe a food company who's who has hundreds of laboratory scientists working on innovation as opposed to animal welfare experts, maybe it's just creating a new generation of factory food under the guise of better environmental footprint. So I think it's early days, and I think that we're all trying to scratch the same itch. We're all trying to be the same change. I think we may actually have a more credible claim to it.
All right, so we're about to run out of time, but I wanted to give you all the opportunity to share any advice that you may have for others. Think of other companies in your specific product category, or just anyone here in the community at large that are either looking to start their journey into letting farm animals live their best life, so to speak, or also beyond that, starting to tell those good farm animal stories. Any advice on how to start that journey?
I think there's two things I would mention, Lisa. One is I do think you need to be a little bit provocative and, pique people's interest. Some of these topics, as I mentioned, people want to go deeper. Sometimes you need to draw them in. So we have some ads in our past at Applegate that were very provocative, and actually cause some, let's call it discomfort with certain groups, right? But what? It raised the topic and it got people talking, and that's what we needed to do. So I would say that's one thing I would leave it with. And the second thing is just making sure we always remember accessibility as an industry. We don't want these things to be concepts and products from on high. The more we can bring it down to look, hot dogs, sausage, scrambled eggs, right? How do we make sure that the products are accessible? We get as much distribution as we can, get the economics to the best place we can so people can afford them and buy them. It's easy sometimes to get really wrapped up in high level storytelling. Accessibility is just such an important part. So we're inviting more and more people into the movement.
I couldn't agree more, John. We talk at Vital Farms about bringing, ethical food to the table at scale. That there's always a higher standard to be had, frankly. But we're not having much of an impact if consumers can't afford it or if they can't get it in their local store. And so we're constantly challenging ourselves to have the most impact while keeping prices and economics sustainable for consumers and farmers alike. And so the advice I would give somebody that wants to have an impact like this is don't let perfect be the enemy of meaningfully better. And that's kind of where we challenge ourselves to live every day.
I would just briefly, and then Ann, over to you, say, if you're a company that's not doing things towards these trends, you'd better start doing it. You'd better at least start diversifying in that regard. And, as you do it, do certain things, silo them separately, have different sort of goals for the business goals, but different ones. Make sure you keep the ethos, if it's an acquired brand, whole and authentic, and you don't suboptimize the really important things about how they procure and the brand they're building. But if you haven't started, you better get started quick, because any good strategy will tell you this isn't just where the puck is going in food. It's already there. The modern consumer insists, and the numbers are shifting before our eyes. So you have to act, and it's easier to do if you take Russell's point about not letting perfection get in the way of progress. But if it helps, think of it as diversification and separate it from the core business so that it can't, it'll fail if it gets grouped in with all of the trappings of running the conventional business.
Yeah, I agree with everything that my other panelists have said. And I think the only thing that I would add that we've learned at GAP, and it was actually said by another panelist earlier today, is it does really take a tribe. That the more that you can do collectively with, putting brands together or putting farmers and brands together, or retailers or other outlets, the more that you can be really successful. And that's not just for being able to have that impact, but the generation of ideas, and just really having a message and a movement that you can feel good about, but that actually does move the needle forward.
Very good. I think that's a good place to stop. And even though we didn't get to everybody's questions, I tried to weave them in, and I was seeing that they were basically being answered, at least to some extent, through some of the other conversations that were coming up. But yeah, I will hand it back over to Celine, and thank you all for listening. And thank you to all of the panelists for sharing your time and expertise with us. I think everyone learned a lot and hopefully came away with some tangible things that they can integrate into their own lives and businesses.
Fantastic, Lisa. Fantastic panel.
Sure was.
Thank you, Russell. Thank you, John. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Ann. really appreciate the time and the thoughtfulness of that conversation. And, you know, as a person in the work that I do, I'm very mindful of how important this conversation is in honoring the role of animals in healthy landscapes. So you guys really delivered on my vision for this conversation with your own authentic voices. So thank you so very much for taking your time to be with us today. So, wow, here we are. Can you believe it? It's the end of a 4-part era. And I just want to say a few things. I'm going to get a little emotional. For those of you who don't know, last year I was diagnosed with breast cancer and had to step back from my role at leading this organization. And Elizabeth and Trey Cates with In Rhythm and my team and Nancy Coulter Parker, who is been designing and leading the conversation over the last 3+ conferences. She had to step back for this one. She laid a lot of foundation for this. And then I kind of stepped back into my role in leading Regenerative Rising. But it has been so powerful, as the phrase, I want to find it in the chat, see if I do it justice, but what was it? Cooperation, collaboration, mushed together. We've been in a living experience of that as an organization. And has been so deeply meaningful to me to feel all the love and support of allies, and have lifted me up, given me support to heal and recover. Is just extraordinary. So I just, again, deep gratitude, Elizabeth, for your care, your leadership, your passion. And Tay, your incredible efforts, and Nancy and Trey and your team. Thank you for being there and for caring about these important conversations, so that not only did they not stop, the bar went up. Having this systemic arc of starting with leadership and moving through these different layers of what impacts this shared initiative that we're inside of how do we drive meaningful, cooperative change that lifts people up. So we had our Native American brethren who brought such beautiful stories to us today. We had that yesterday. I'm so grateful that those people have said yes to the invitation to bring their stories to our platform and let us share them with all of you. So we're going to be shifting into more kind of pulling from our archives, telling those stories, doing our podcast for the next several months. I'm going to take a little bit of a step back to continue my own healing journey. But our team continues to cultivate and build and grow. And we just invite all of you to continue to support our online presence and our social conversations and be in that with us. I think I said what I felt to say right there.
Oh, Selene, thank you so much. It's been such a privilege for me to be able to be in support of you and do this work. And I'm so proud to be part of this community. I mean, and just the diversity of people, the diversity of thinking, the diversity of methodology, that we all constantly lean on each other, learn from each other, and rise together is really wonderful.
Yes, it is. It's a celebration. I mean, our diversity is our strength, our diversity in the living systems of our planet. That's what we're learning to heal. And it starts with us as human beings. We have to heal with each other for us to be able to expand consideration to all of the voiceless ones around us. So I just honor each of you who tune in and care. Caring is the foundation of everything. So I bless you. I thank you. And For those of you who are interested, we are going to have a little bit more camaraderie, community connecting. We're going to have larger chat rooms. I think we should make them pretty big, Tay, and just let people have some time to just honor each other, honor what they're being touched by in this journey that we've been inside together. And again, stay in our conversations, continue to help us respond to you. Also send us messages. We're here to serve.